If you couldn't guess by now, I love movies, but the one medium I adore the most is animation. Unlike live action, animation as a medium is truly limitless. It can bring any world you imagine to life, tell any story you want, and look however you want it to look. From every little detail, from the tiniest rock to the largest planet. Every single frame is handcrafted with love and attention. So as expected, I do find it frustrating that animation is often wrapped into stigma that it's only for kids. And because of that, animation for the longest time has been disrespected in the worst ways possible because of it. Blame it on Disney, blame it on a lot of bad animated films being aimed towards kids, it doesn't matter. And unfortunately, this also extends to the awards. Which leads us to today's topic, the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. Now, the Oscar for Best Animated Feature is a complicated topic no matter how you frame it. On one hand, it seems like this is an apology for not acknowledging the art form's importance sooner, and a way of highlighting the artistic merit the medium has in its very own spotlight. But on the other hand, the category quickly devolved and developed a controversial reputation, mostly because the voters deciding the winner have often outright admitted they don't actually bother watching the nominated films or just ask what their kids liked. As a result, for years it served as just an automatic award given to Disney or Pixar almost by default. And it really doesn't help that the main reason why this award exists is to quite literally encourage companies not to put them in the running for more prestigious awards, simply because of the outrage Beauty and the Beast got when it was nominated for Best Picture. Yes, I am dead serious. Animation as a medium is that looked down upon. And while I will agree the award has gotten better over time, but to quote JA Productions, the damage has been done. It may be selecting better nominations more often and picking more unconventional winners now, but that still doesn't change the fact that this is the same award that ignored beloved films like The Lego Movie and A Silent Voice to instead unironically nominate films like Shark Tale and The Boss Baby. But even with all that said, this is one of the strongest lineups of movies I've ever seen, in spite of the Academy's clear disrespect for the medium. You've got a varied smorgasbord, ranging from mainstream hits to hidden gems. It covers so many different genres: comedy, romance, drama, horror, thriller, adventure, action, and everything in between. On average, these movies range from genuine masterpieces to just okay. So let's get started. This will be my biggest ranking to date, so obviously I'm going to set some ground rules here. Rule number 1. I'll only be looking at the nominees, not the winners, mainly because I feel like the winners and losers are each their own unique can of worms worth discussing in separate videos. Rule number 2. If there is a movie whose nomination I feel is unwarranted or there was a better pick, I will give my opinions on what film I think should have been nominated instead, either from what I've watched, what I've seen, or from what I hear people talk about. As well, I will only be picking films from the submission list from each year, just to be fair. Rule number 3. I will be spoiling a lot of these movies. Not all of them, but if you don't want to risk having a movie spoiled for you, I left timestamps in the description so you can skip over them. And rule number 4. If you feel like I've ranked a film lower on the list than you personally would, then feel free to disagree. Seriously, we're literally comparing the Minions to Hayao Miyazaki. Some movies are just going to be objectively better than others off that beat alone. And lastly, if I sound like a broken record at any point, that is simply because some of these movies deal with similar subject matter, and whatever I could say for one may be similar to how I feel about another. With all that said, this will be a long ranking, so grab some popcorn, go to the restroom, and do what needs to be done. Let's get this marathon started. And like always, we'll be starting with the worst movie to ever be nominated for this category and slowly work our way to the top. Let's begin, shall we?
Boo! You stink!
Let's be completely honest. There were only 3 films on this list destined for the bottom spots, and all 3 of them have one big thing in common. They have absolutely no reason, nor can you make any reasonable argument for them being nominated. But I still had to choose one of these abominations to the medium to be bottom spot, and surprise surprise, The Boss Baby is not the bottom spot. Because it at least has the decency of being such a bafflingly chaotic mess that it is, indeed, something to behold. Which is why, the obvious bottom spot, the title of absolute worst, Best Animated Feature nominee without a question, is not Shark Tale. Because Shark Tale, as bad as it is, has a factor of ironic enjoyment for just how mind-bogglingly broken and horrendous this movie is. Which is why the bottom spot goes to a film that has nothing of either ironic or unironic enjoyment. One that is truly soulless and actively pisses me off. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one, the only, Ralph Breaks the Internet. Everything anyone has ever said about this film is 100% true. This movie is literally nothing more than a big corporate jerk-off fest that shoves real-world brands and sites into your face at every second. The worst part, obviously, being the Oh My Disney section, which is hilarious in retrospect because the blog no longer exists. Speaking of which, this movie fills itself with tons of memes and references to stuff popular back in 2018. This movie is not even 10 years old, but it feels like it belongs in a fossil bed already. I don't think I need to tell you this, but memes from 2018 are not funny in the year 2025 when this video is being edited. Say what you will about The Boss Baby, but nothing in that film aggressively dates it as badly as Ralph Breaks the Internet. And any attempt at comedy it does do is more cringe than comical. Okay, scratch that. There's like 2 scenes in here that got a good chuckle out of me. The first is when Ralph psychologically scars a young child. And the second is probably what the film is most famous for.
Bruh.
But we're not finished with it yet. Oh no, we're not. Ralph and Vanellope's characters are so bad here that calling it character assassination is a compliment. This is character slaughter. Ralph is now a giant man-child who is willing to threaten entire worlds because he is obsessed over a literal 10-year-old girl. And it just makes the movie feel incredibly uncomfortable. And this is coming from someone who's watched Happy Sugar Life more than once. So with that said, you know it has to be bad. Vanellope is basically going turbo and never once considers what will happen when she leaves her game, and suffers no consequences for it at all. Say what you will about Shark Tale, but at least that's an original film that doesn't desecrate a really good first movie. And because we need to focus on advertising and memes, it drops potentially fun plot lines like finding the Sugar Rush characters' new homes, Felix and Calhoun becoming adopted parents, and plenty of others. I guess we needed Ralph as a screaming goat more.
4bot Mob interrupts this program for an important observation. The filmmakers didn't even use the actual goat scream associated with this meme. If you're going to reference something, why not actually go all the way?
I do like some things about it, like the Ralph monster in Spamly, but I will admit I have not seen the majority of the snubbed films from 2018, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms, deserved the nomination more. There is a lot more wrong with this movie, but what's the point? Shea Frillis dissected it really well, and Rakotar did the same thing, but even better. What a truly, truly awful experience.
You promised these children
Incredibles 2.
but all I saw out there was
Shit!
I would like to apologize. because I was wrong about this. What I said was completely untrue. The truth is, there's a fourth movie that does not deserve the nomination that also has no arguments for it being nominated. A sequel to The Incredibles has a lot of good ideas, but it feels like they purposely chose the worst ideas you could go with. It has some fun action scenes, but it's just drowned out by a sea of mediocrity. The movie's story is just a pseudo rehash of the first film, except now the parent working for the corporation is not doing it behind their family's back. The twist villain is dumb. Her whole reason to be evil is just because her father was a monumentous idiot. Everything with Violet and her boyfriend getting his memory erased is pointless and feels like a forced way to create drama. Everything with Jack is just filler that serves no purpose other than to pad out the runtime. Bob is honestly really unlikable, and it feels like they walked back his character growth from the last film. But to be fair, he is at least nothing like Dash, who is genuinely an annoying turd in this film. To be honest, this whole movie feels like it was meant to be a direct-to-DVD movie that was unfortunately slapped into theaters, like Norm of the North was. But even that's not a fair comparison, because at least people still talk about Norm of the North even 10 years later. While after demanding it for 14 years, nobody talks about Incredibles 2. I have no idea why people say Incredibles 2 is just okay or painfully average, because, my god, this is a legitimately bad movie. It may not be as bad as Wreck-It Ralph 2, if anything because it doesn't have that awful meme culture and Disney self-promoting in it, but it's a special kind of insulting when this is the best they can come up with in almost 20 years. Smallfoot deserved the nomination more. It may not be an amazing movie, but it's definitely an incredible film when put in comparison to The Incredibles 2.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
Shark Tale is such an atrocious movie, but I can also see why some people love it. I don't have much to say about it that hasn't been said already, so I'll keep it brief. Or should I say, I'll keep it reef. Yes, the designs of the fish are really, really bad and uncanny. Yes, Oscar is a horribly written character and makes a lot of incredibly stupid decisions. Yes, it is the embodiment of every worst trait that DreamWorks as a studio is known for. But you know what? Shea Frillis is right. It's just captivating with how much of a mess it is, and that gives this movie a lot of ironic enjoyment as a result. Say what you will about this movie, but there is truly no other film on this list quite like Shark Tale. But there is absolutely no reason this should have been nominated over the SpongeBob SquarePants movie.
Well, say hello to my little friends.
Well, say hello to my little friend, 5-day-old Diaper!
And we've finally made it. Out of all the films on this list, this is the one people point towards as the biggest reason for why the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature is a joke. Allow me to introduce to you the one, the only, Les Boss Baby. Going into it, I was expecting a truly utter train wreck, but I was disappointed. Not because I liked the movie, but because it wasn't the mega disaster I was hoping it would be. Instead, it was one of the most confusing yet not confusing messes I've seen in a while. The main story is about as run-of-the-mill as you can get, but everything involving the world building is so confusing and raises so many questions, it's actually a sight to behold. The movie is incredibly infantile and packed with cringe comedy, but it was also surprisingly creative at points and even a little fun. Its attempts at drama are laughable, but the score by Hans Zimmer goes needlessly hard. Yes, it's not a good movie, but in my opinion that you can disagree with, it is not one of DreamWorks' all-time worst. But with that said, it absolutely didn't deserve its nomination. I've yet to see the Lego Batman movie, but even I know that was robbed of a nomination. But, truth be told, I feel like I'm being a little unfair to the other submissions. The whole year of 2017 was stacked with bangers and underrated gems galore. If the Academy had been competent for 5 seconds, we could have had a lineup of nominations that compete with the 2009 lineup in terms of quality. But no, even though I don't think this is nearly as bad as people say it is, the Academy had to pull an Academy and nominate this dirty diaper instead of the actual gems. Oy vey.
Are you the baby Jesus?
Yes, I'm the baby Jesus.
Now you must acquire a taste for freeform jazz.
So, what's worse? A bad comedy or a bad romance? I like to argue a bad romance, because unlike comedy, the central romance is integral to the movie. And unfortunately, Chico and Rita is just that. Yeah, I know a lot of people like this movie, but I'm sorry, it just didn't work for me. I like some of the visuals and a couple scenes, but I'm sorry, the romance between our titular characters is just not believable. Chico basically stalks Rita for the first half of the movie. Rita is justified for feeling betrayed by Chico with the stuff he does, and neither have any believable chemistry with each other. I actually think Pocahontas and John Smith have a more believable romance than these two do. I am not joking. And worse, since this core romance is about as believable as Bigfoot being an alien, the film is just incredibly tedious because of it. I know Shark Tale is technically a worse movie, but at the same time, it is still a far more entertaining film, even if for all the wrong reasons. And while Chico and Rita does have some good moments, they are just dragged down by an artificial romance. And I don't think there is any reason Arthur Christmas should have been snubbed in favor of this.
A big, fat panda who treats it like a joke.
As someone who hates cringe comedy and awkward humor, I would like to give a visual representation of my experience watching Turning Red. Now, there were at least going to be a few films that rank on this list lower than they honestly should. Not because of objective quality, but because of my subjective preferences. And let me tell you, Turning Red is the biggest victim of this. I do like some elements of it. I like the dad, the aunts were kind of fun, and the backstory about the Red Panda curse was really cool, even though it would have made a much better movie than what we got. But aside from that, this movie really reeks of needing another rewrite or two, and its biggest flaws all stem from its emotional core, ironically enough. Honoring those we care about while also honoring who we are as individuals. This falls apart for two reasons. The first is that I don't really care for Mei Mei's friends. None of them really stuck out in their own unique way, and it mostly felt like the script was just hitting the story beats you'd expect with these kinds of characters, except Abby. She was really, really annoying. Which brings us to the second and easily biggest issue. The mom. She is honestly one of the most dislikable characters I've seen in any recent Disney film, let alone Pixar. Her helicopter parenting not only causes the conflict of the movie, but it also actively makes things worse. And I'm sorry, the emotional resolution they have just feels hollow. Imagine if in Encanto, the reconciliation Mirabel has with Alma was not because of the latter owing up to her mistakes, but instead because the writers used her trauma as an excuse for the stuff she does to Mirabel, and the latter just forgives her because of it. Bada bing, bada boom, you've got the reconciliation with Mei Mei and her mom in a nutshell. And I am well aware that she does go through a character arc where she becomes less like this and becomes a better parent by the end. But so did Buck Cluck. and you don't see people launching defenses for him. To be fair, there are some strong stuff with the thematics, like growing up and figuring out who you are as a person, and the final fight scene with the giant red panda mom is honestly kind of fun with high stakes. Oh, she's twerking. She's battling her mom by twerking. You know, it was a lot easier for me to watch Fixed all the way through than this. I am not jesting. I feel bad for criticizing what is very clearly a passion project based on the director's own life, but it's just hard for me to find stuff I like about it because its cringy humor and its honestly kind of muddled storytelling really makes the worst aspects of this film even more so. Between my two YouTube channels, most agree Goodbye Don-Glees would have been a better nomination. Not only does it have gorgeous visuals, but it also has similar themes to Turning Red without the cringe. I don't think this is necessarily a bad movie, but it is definitely an acquired taste. One that I sadly do not have.
You can't stop me.
Rayman and the Last Add-on. The best way I can describe this movie is that it has the qualities needed to make it a 7 out of 10, but is dragged down several pegs by its worst qualities. First, the good stuff. I think the action in this movie is great. It's fast, well choreographed, and if I am being honest, I like the idea of Raya herself. It's cool to see a Disney princess who is a lot more cynical of the world around her, and it spices things up from the usual adorkable princesses or just Disney princesses in general. And I like the side characters. The thief baby, the soul survivor, the shrimp kid. It has all the makings of a good movie. Except for one big blight. The message is horrible. I know this is something everybody's talked about at this point, but its message about trust is so fundamentally f***ed that it's actually potentially harmful to anyone who watches it and actually takes the message seriously. But in truth, it's just more reflective of just how bad the writing is. Be it entire plot points, 2 lines of dialogue, and yeah, I will join the bandwagon. Sisu is an annoying character. She's not as bad as people make her out to be, but she is still grating. Just imagine the genie from Aladdin, but with no likable qualities, and you've basically got Sisu. I'll also jump on another bandwagon. I agree it would have worked a lot better as a 5-part miniseries or even a trilogy of films, as there's just too much lore and character growth needed to make this story work that a 90-minute movie just could never provide. I haven't seen Belle, but I am going to take a wild guess and say it deserved the nomination more. Oh well, what am I going to do about it? Okay, take a moment, take a few seconds. I want you to actually think about this for a moment. By proxy of Despicable Me 2 getting a nomination for this prestigious award, this means the Academy themselves genuinely believe that a movie starring the Minions is just as good as stuff made by Hayao Miyazaki. I'm not gonna lie, that's actually kind of hilarious. Anyways, Despicable Me Part 2. It's as generic of a bare-bones sequel a sequel can get. I do like some of the world building it does, and as generic as it is, I do think giving Gru a love interest is a natural next step for his character. After all, the core of this franchise is found family, so a stepmom for the Goyles? Why not? El Macho was also kinda good. I wish we had more villainous stuff for him to do, but I guess he was passable. The Minions were also just kind of there. They weren't annoying, they weren't funny, they were just noise. Honestly, I see the blueprints of a really good follow-up here. Maybe I should even make a video about that sometime. But as is, this really does feel just like Despicable Me 1, but without that strong writing or emotional core that made that film work. I know 2013 was a pretty weak year in terms of animated movies, but there were still better choices than this. If they really had to play it safe, Monsters University would have been my pick. But if you have to spend an afternoon with the little ones, you can honestly do worse than Despicable Me 2.
Yikes! Illegal aliens.
A lot of these bottom tier movies may have no good reason to have been nominated, but I feel Elio is the only movie here that truly has no reason at all to have been nominated. It reached historic levels for Disney with how much it flopped at the box office, so it doesn't have that Frozen excuse. It had zero cultural impact because nobody bothered marketing it, so it doesn't have that K-pop Demon Hunters excuse. The reception it received was middling at best. Even something like Shark Tale or The Boss Baby are ironically enjoyable at points. It doesn't even have any inclusivity, so the super crazy conservatives can't hate watch it into popularity, nor could the super crazy progressives skyrocket it into popularity. I'll put a pin in that for later, but how? How did this join the ranks of Studio Ghibli and the best of Disney? Getting back on track, though not part of the coming of age trilogy, it really feels like a tail end to it, in the most generic way possible. There are things I like about it. The Communiverse is a fun, creative place. I wish that could be said for the rest of the movie. And I sort of like the villain, even though I don't remember his name. I thought whoever voiced him was perfect for an evil alien warlord, even if his motivations aren't too different from the parents in other recent Pixar movies. That's it. That's all the good stuff I have to say about Elio. It's a very generic film. The story is generic and predictable. The art design and animation, while it does have some nice looking moments, is that now generic Bean Mouse style that most people are sick of, including me. And this movie feels like a Frankenstein of ideas and plot points from prior Disney and Pixar films. Elio has difficult relations with his aunt, and they struggle to connect and understand each other. Kind of like the entire Coming of Age trilogy. Elio is sent to summer camp, but is taken away to another world and a duplicate takes his place while he's gone. Kind of like the Owl House. There's a liar revealed and the people send Elio away before coming back to save the day. Kind of like A Bug's Life. Elio's parents are dead, because it's Disney. Both he and his aunt must adapt to their new parent-child role, while he also befriends an alien that is being hunted down by scarier aliens, kind of like Lilo and Stitch. The main conflict with the alien is that he is the child of a big, scary criminal, and this conflict is resolved with the big, scary criminal accepting that his son doesn't want to be a big, scary monster like he is. Oh, come on, that's not even a Disney movie. There was also originally going to be a plot point involving Elio's clone where it gradually shapeshifts into a monster based on how the real Elio feels. Wow, they were even taking inspiration from their worst movies for this one. Yay! Walking back this list for a moment, even though they do mention it sparsely, Elio's parents dying basically has no impact or purpose to either the plot or his character. So this story could be rewritten to where the aunt is just his single mother or something and nothing would change. Honestly, if they did do that, it'd make his connection with Glordon over how they are basically the reverse of each other a bit stronger. Speaking of, Elio was advertised as having only one eye. But in the movie, he only has a black eye, with a patch that covers it. Is this the first case of Disney disable baiting people into watching their films? This movie is also a pseudo-autobiography of the director's life, and even though it's better than the worst of the Coming of Age trilogy, it's still a generic film at the end of the day. Also, I should mention it because it was really the only thing people were talking about. Elio himself was apparently going to be LGBTQ initially, but they removed it because parents didn't want to be put in a position where their afternoon of bonding with their 5-year-olds became a discussion about the birds and the bees, and why some bees prefer to be with birds, and why some birds identify as bees. And everyone says that would have made the movie a lot better had they kept it. Would it though? Even with this, Elio as a movie would still be a boring, generic film without an ounce of originality that hasn't already been done better in prior Disney and Pixar movies. To quote Shimbapaloopa Lophasis Productions,
"Boring, generic animated movies with a gay character deserve to be seen by kids as much as boring, generic animated movies with all straight characters."
I'm only bringing this up because there is nothing to talk about with this movie. I'll give them this: at least if they kept evil Elio, that would have made the movie somewhat more interesting. Honestly, this movie kind of pissed me off with just how generic it is. Genuinely, I don't know how Elio got nominated. It truly is the only real, provable case of a movie being nominated for this award solely based on the studio's clout. It may also be a typical animated movie for kids, but I think Night of the Zoopocalypse was a much better movie by a long shot. At least that film had some originality, creativity, and even fun that is lacking in this film. Yes, a movie made by the same company that brought you Monster Family, Hit Pig, and 100% Wolf made a movie that was better than this Pixar movie. If you're curious, I'd rank it somewhere above I Lost My Body, but below Loving Vincent. Sorry, I got sidetracked, because literally anything else is more interesting to talk about than Elio. Let's just move on.
You know I've only got one brain cell, right? And it's working overtime on this baby.
If I had to choose which movie was the hardest for me to get through, Turning Red was still the hardest one. But Inside Out 2 came in a very close second. I didn't care for the first movie much, but even I will admit Inside Out 2 is one of those sequels that has a lot of potential. And it does follow up the original in many natural ways. Ways you'd want to see the story of Inside Out continue. Riley growing up, new emotions, further fleshing out the mindscape, etc. It's as creative as the first movie and can be just as funny. It has a lot of the same great world building, and the characters, or more specifically, the emotions, are still fun. And the new emotions are great in their own right. They're not as good as the original 5, but they are a welcome addition. And on top of that, it does a wonderful job capturing the hardship of change and growing up. So, what could possibly prevent me from actually ranking this movie any higher? Well, first off, the movie is a pseudo rehash of the first film, with Riley losing some of her emotions and them having to go on a journey through the mindscape to get back, all the while the remaining emotions wreak havoc on her mind. Secondly, these movies also provide plenty of secondhand embarrassment for me, which, at this point, you probably know I have a vendetta against. But my biggest issue isn't even with this movie in particular, but the Inside Out movies in general. Despite Riley and her emotions essentially being written the same way as Andy is with his toys, I don't connect with Riley because she is not a character. To me, she feels like how the Jaegers in Pacific Rim do, a mech piloted by the emotions. It creates a disconnect because whenever Riley does something, I don't see it as her letting her emotions get the better of her, but the pilots being incompetent, and that really hinders any investment I could have in the story, as anything she does is not really her own actions, by proxy of these pieces being what essentially control her actions. I'm going to get so much hate for what I'm about to say, but if there is anything good I can say about the Emoji Movie is that at least Alex and his emojis are truly separate characters from one another. I'm not saying Cash Grab the movie is better than Inside Out 2. No. Inside Out 2 is definitely a good movie. But it's definitely a movie aimed for someone that isn't me. But I'm dead serious when I say there is no reason Look Back should have been snubbed for this. Or at the very least, they should have nominated Transformers 1. But hey, maybe Nazar 2 will make up for that.
I like the word moist, okay? It's who I am!
So, during the early 2020s, Pixar released 3 films based on the director's experience growing up, all of which follow a common theme. The main character wants to honor their family, but something happens that forces them and their friends to fix the issue. The main character discovers who they are, or discovers their true passions. They come into conflict with their family because of this, they may or may not split up with their friends because of this, and the day is saved by the main character reconciling with said family and friends, and they continue living their life pursuing their passions. Out of all 3 films in this coming-of-age trilogy, quite obviously, I think Turning Red is the worst of these. While on the flip side, spoilers for later, I consider Luca to be the best of this, let's be honest, mixed bag of a trilogy. Elemental is just kind of in the middle. I like the visual design of the world the characters live in, and most of the titular elements are all visually creative. I guess I like Ember, more so than Mei Mei at least, and I do like the connection she and Wade share, and that Vivisteria scene was easily my favorite part. Yeah, that's kind of it. The immigrant allegory has some strong moments, like Ember's childhood or the father's origin story, but the racial allegory part of this, while arguably better than Zootopia's, is also a bit more questionable at points. You have some good uses of it, like Ember meeting Wade's family, but then you have moments like Ember calling a cloud person a
Cloud puff.
Would that be the same as someone calling a black person a you-know-what? That's just uncomfortable to think about. Okay, this is me putting this part in post-production, but I forgot to mention this about Elemental, and how it also makes the racial allegory between these elements not work. In the movie, even though it is very much unintentional, the elements actually do cause physical harm to one another, on multiple occasions. Water douses fire, fire burns earth, even Ember's heat at one point evaporates Wade. This adds an issue that is unique to this film because, unlike real life where racial prejudice is purely superficial, in the world of Elemental, there is an actual valid reason for these elements to be against mixing with one another. More often than not, one will get hurt. Say what you will about Zootopia's similar themes, at least the literal predators weren't hurting prey by just merely existing. And I'll be honest, the whole elemental aspect doesn't really add anything to the movie outside of visual flair. And aside from a few scenes, it doesn't really do anything creative with its elemental theme. And it definitely doesn't make up for a very predictable, unlikely love story. From what people have said on both of my channels, most seem to agree Unicorn Wars should have been nominated instead. And as this is the final installment of the Coming of Age trilogy, it honestly summarizes these 3 films up perfectly. A real mixed bag of greatness and not so greatness.
The cat came back, they thought he was a goner.
A Cat in Paris was the one movie I'm the most mixed on. And upon the second viewing, it honestly lost a lot of favor with me. I enjoy the adventure these characters get into and the soundtrack. And the art style lends itself to one of the most unique looking films in the ranking. But I'm sorry, even though it's the shortest movie on the list, that's not an advantage. It could have used an additional 30 minutes because this whole movie feels like it was never fleshed out besides the basic premise. The characters, the conflict, the story is about as basic as you can imagine. its simplicity, ironically, is its greatest flaw. Spoilers for later, but Ernest and Celestine is also a very short, simplistic movie, but it makes better use of its runtime and focuses it primarily on the titular characters and their struggles, which was the right choice because this movie is a laid-back slice of life film. That does not work here because A Cat in Paris primarily focuses on action and spectacle, which doesn't really help it when there is no characters to truly get invested in. It's not a bad movie, not by a long shot, but it definitely needed an extra 20 to 30 minutes of runtime to actually give it that extra oomph and make it a little less bare bone. I've never seen The Adventures of Tintin, but even I can tell you that this was robbed of a nomination.
All I smell is bullshit.
2017 was an interesting year for Best Animated Feature, because while it may not be the worst lineup this award has ever seen, but it can also be argued that it's the most infamous lineup this category has had thus far. It has some strong, even unique choices for the time, but it can also be argued half the entire shortlist from that year, including the winner, had better alternatives that were snubbed in favor of them. The Boss Baby is the most infamous of 2017's nominees, but there was also a second black sheep among them, Ferdinand, the only other Blue Sky movie in their lifetime to ever get a nomination for this coveted award. And if The Boss Baby is an infamous example of the Academy not caring about animation and just nominating whatever, then by that logic, if Ferdinand is infamous for anything other than the dabbing horses, it's being the most blatant example of a safe choice this category has ever made. To be fair, I really like the first third of this movie, and Ferdinand's friendship with Nina is just so sweet and wholesome, and I really like the China shop scene. But once we get to the ranch, it quickly becomes like any other generic animated kids movie with far too many characters in its lineup. And because of this, many of the connections Ferdinand is supposed to make with the other animals is very underdeveloped. Lupe is by far the most annoying comic relief in this ranking so far. The hedgehogs aren't annoying, but they aren't funny either. And the final act goes on for far too long in my opinion. The chase scene through the city was great, and is easily the best part of this entire movie, but the ending bullfight is a little unnecessary, especially since the original story didn't have an ending fight. Also, this doesn't add anything, but Ferdinand probably has the worst joke in this entire ranking.
I've fallen and I can't giddy up!
And while I do like Ferdinand and Nina's friendship, I'd care about them being separated more if it wasn't forgotten about for a good chunk of the runtime in favor of dancing cows. And that's just Ferdinand. It's a passable kids film, but nothing else. And I think it's obvious there is no reason A Silent Voice should have been snubbed in favor of the movie with dabbing horses. Now to the real question. I bet you're wondering, given my thoughts on Coco, what movie would I have swapped it out for that year? Bird Boy and the Forgotten Children, and it's not even close.
You burned my house to the ground! My family's dead!
Monster House, much like some other movies on this list, is a film that I haven't seen since I was a kid. And I'll be honest, this movie really didn't hold up. Overall, it is a fairly solid horror movie for kids, and it hits those Halloween scary story beats one would expect from a movie like this. And while the motion capture doesn't look that good, especially 20 years after its release, as of this video, I actually think it benefits the eerie and kind of uncanny tone the movie is aiming for. Which, yeah, let's be honest with ourselves, the movie's concept is what carries this film, and everything to do with the titular monster house is the best part. From how its interior works like an actual living creature, to the lore and mystery behind the house itself, to how it even moves. It has a lot of fun with this creative premise, and the house is fittingly both terrifying and tragic. It's not the most terrifying thing in the ranking, but it is, without any question, a very unique take on the haunted house idea. Also, the fat kid's name is Chowder.
That trimmer shall be mine, old man!
With that said, everything else is not that good. Removing the unique premise, its story is a basic haunted house movie for kids. Who could have guessed? One that doesn't really develop its main characters beyond the basics, and its main overarching theme is the most inconsistent one in the ranking so far. Like, it sets up the idea that the main characters are going to have to accept they are getting too old for the things they did in years prior, but then that's completely dropped in favor of the mystery, and when the third act arrived, it's all of a sudden a story about loneliness and letting go of the past. What? When was this ever implied? If the kid's mom or dad died, I could see this as being more impactful, but this was never built up to, let alone considered. And if they were aiming to compare the main character having to accept they won't be able to go trick-or-treating eventually, to Nevercracker watching his wife die, I'm sorry, but those are two different things. I've heard people say this is the overall best animated movie to be nominated that year, which I strongly disagree with. But I don't think anyone will contest me when I say A Scanner Darkly deserved the nomination more than the Man-Eating House movie. Now for the real question. For $1 million, which one would you spend an hour in? The Monster House or the Deathbed, the bed that eats? Let me know in the comments.
Drive it in my truck right after a beer. Hey, that bump is shaped like a deer.
Cars has been talked about to death, so I'll keep it brief. It's a nice love letter to the sport of motor racing with a nice message, a good character arc for Lightning McQueen, and an ending that is truly, genuinely exciting and heartwarming. So I am putting this in post-production because I did some more thinking about it, and there is something I forgot to talk about, and actually something new I can add to the discussion around Cars. First, I really like the story with Doc Hudson, and how both he and Lightning challenge each other to be better individuals. And after a while, I think I finally found an answer to the biggest question people have about this movie. What thematic purpose do the characters being cars serve? It's simple. This movie is about enjoying the simple things in life. So what better way to tell a story about learning to take life slow than through the eyes of something built for speed and nothing else? See, there is thematic purpose to them being cars. Now back to our irregularly scheduled program. Yes, the world building is questionable, but it just shows that even at their worst, Pixar, in their golden age, shined brightly. I know 2006 was a pretty dry year in terms of animation. Truth be told, even though people say that Over the Hedge should have been nominated over Cars, I disagree. Paprika would have been a much better nomination, but I guess it wasn't as good as the Talking Car movie.
Stupid dog! You made me look bad!
Watching all these movies back to back, not necessarily in order mind you, I came to the realization that the 2008 shortlist actually has a lot of similarities with the 2001 shortlist, in that it had two of the most beloved animated films of that decade going at it for that coveted title. Neither were any more different from each other, and though it wasn't as legendary as Shrek vs. Monsters Incorporated, Kung Fu Panda vs. WALL-E was still legendary in its own right. All the while, that year's safe pick sat there in the corner and just watched it all go down. Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have much to add to the conversation. Like, I really love the premise. Bolt is essentially what happens when you crossbreed Homeward Bound with The Truman Show. A dog who thinks he's a superhero that gets lost in the real world and has to find his way back home. On paper, that sounds really fun, and the first and final acts definitely are. But that middle chunk of the movie really takes a steep nosedive and just becomes like any other fish out of water buddy road trip movie for kids you may have seen. And it surprisingly doesn't even try to take full advantage of the superhero parody aspect this film promises. And I think Shea Frillis might have poisoned my mind, because I agree with him. Adam West as Bolt would have been so much better than John Travolta. In hindsight, I guess it was a better choice than Dragon Hunters or Delgo, but there is no way you're going to convince me that Waltz with Bashir was not a better choice. Doubt it would have beaten Pixar, but still. As is, Bolt is cute. You could do better, but you can certainly do far, far worse.
It's a zombie!
I am going to anger a lot of people for ranking Paranorman this low. But I'm sorry, I wasn't able to get into it. It's not my first time watching it, but even when I first did back in 2012, I still couldn't get into it even back then. Without a doubt, the paranormal bits are the best parts. Funny, creative, and the villain and twist behind her is my favorite parts. It's clear they wanted to make the movie just for this idea alone, and the lore of the witch and her curse is really interesting, especially when the twist is revealed. Though, the more I look back at it, it was the most obvious thing they could have done considering this movie's themes. Besides that, it's just your typical outcast story where the main character must save his town from an incoming threat. Kind of like Chicken Little, except better, don't at me. On top of being yet another standard horror movie for kids. Spoilers for later, but while I think Frankenweenie is in the same ballpark, it has a lot more going for it. Its story has more compelling themes, its conflict is a bit more original, even the main character, despite being another outcast, his story arc is very different from what one would expect from an outcast. Do I hate Paranorman? No, I think it's a fine enough movie. Definitely better than Monster House, as Laika did more with its premise than just the bare minimum. But much like Monster House, it's still another film that mostly coasts off its premise than anything else. I'm not saying it's devoid of quality, but it's definitely a step down from Coraline. The Painting was most certainly a better pick that year, but Paranorman is a fine Halloween movie, in my opinion, that you can honestly, openly disagree with.
Magic.
Onward, onward, onward. I'll say this much, I was not expecting to like this movie as much as I did. But I also didn't like it as much as I think most of you were hoping I would. I really do like the idea of a magical world that lost said magic with the advent of science, and I like the overall post-magic world it builds up. In fact, I like it so much, I honestly wouldn't mind a sequel or a series that fleshes this world out further. But what raises this movie above other films like Cars is its emotional core. Its overall message and conclusion are easily the strongest parts of this movie. Also, I like the bridge scene. It was great. But I don't like how people's magic and adventurous spirits are just restored by interacting with these two brothers for a few seconds. It honestly feels really, really forced. And I know I'm just going to parrot what other people say, but I think Chris Pratt does not do Barley any favors, as this goofball comes off more as a smug asshole. And I do agree that I think Jack Black, or heck, even Seth Rogen would have done a better job.
What are you looking at? Honestly, your weird dead eyes.
I haven't seen Ride Your Wave, but I have a wild gut feeling that this fantasy movie deserved the nomination more than this fantasy movie.
You see, we could have made that with the good wind behind us, but unfortunately there's this dirty great sea monster in the way.
I'll just say it up front. Luca is just a better version of Turning Red. Luca's coming of age is better, him finding his passions is more engaging, even the transforming adolescent bit is handled a lot better in my opinion. I like Urkelay with how intentionally pathetic of a villain he is, and I like the friendship Luca has with Julia. But it also still has a lot of that awkward humor I despise. Sorry, but anything that gives me secondhand embarrassment is immediately going to tank any list. I mean, the awkward moments are not as bad as Turning Red's, but it's still pretty bad. Luca's a fine film, I'm not mad it got nominated, and I'm not mad other films were snubbed. All in all, Luca is the greatest piece of Vespa propaganda ever conceived. Poopelle of Chimneytown honestly looks like a more interesting movie, but honestly, what are you going to do about it? It's definitely a better choice than Boss Baby 2, that's for sure.
And now you work for me, boomers!
Making the mother of all omelets here, Jack. Can't fret over every egg.
Man, the whiplash I got from going back to this movie after watching The Last Wish can't be stated. In any case, Puss in Boots the First. This was the first time I went back to watch this film in well over a decade, and yeah, it's definitely a movie. I appreciate that it's not trying to be Shrek 2.0, and there's plenty of fun action, and I even like the backstory they give Puss in this movie. But the backstory takes up so much time that the adventure and really the movie itself feels incredibly short. And I can appreciate what they're trying to do with Humpty Dumpty, and I do like his redemption at the end. But it's hard for me to sympathize for him or even want to see these two be brothers again because of everything that happens in this movie. I'll just keep it short. Basically, whatever this movie did, The Last Wish does way better. I know 2011 was a particularly weak year for animation, but if I had to pick, I think Wrinkles would have been a much better choice. But as is, I guess Puss in Boots is a better choice than something like Hoodwink 2. It's definitely a better choice than Hoodwink 2.
Jack Link's Beef Jerky presents Messin' with Sasquatch.
Yeah, you're seeing this correctly. I think Missing Link is a slightly better movie than Paranorman. Ooh, I'm going to enjoy seeing the comment section for this video, let me tell you. I just think Missing Link is better from both a story and presentation standpoint. There's more of an adventure. I feel more dramatic tension during their journey. I think it's even a little bit more creative. But what sells me on this movie being better than Paranorman are the characters. Susan is a really fun character, and their interactions with Sir Lionel Frost is what really carries the film. It's a really solid partnership, one born of blunt understanding and a mutual goal. There is no splitting up, no lie revealed. They are just unlikely partners who become good friends through hardships and turmoil, who both appreciate the other for who and what they are. I really appreciate the movie for doing this, and the ex-wife is a good foil for both Frost and Susan. And the comedy in this film is great. The slapstick, the timing, it's the opposite to Ferdinand. I think this movie may have the best joke in the entire ranking.
The people we don't want here are leaving! Force them to stay!
I mean, it's a very basic, by-the-numbers kids fantasy adventure film, which I don't mind too much because it's still a fun movie. It not only causes this film to lack a distinctive identity of its own, but this issue is compounded by the fact that it has to stand side by side with Laika's other works. When compared to the unique fantasy of Coraline, the adventure of Kubo, even the sort of insanity of the Box Trolls, it really lacks that, richness the studio usually brings. But it's not just Laika's other works, because I'm also comparing it to well over 83 other movies in this ranking. I know you can say a lot of the same things about Ice Age, but at least Ice Age has a distinctive identity all of its own. If Ferdinand wasn't nominated, this would probably be the biggest example of a safe choice the Academy has made for this award. And I think it goes without saying, Primal should have been nominated instead. Oh yeah, the first few episodes of Primal were stuck together to create an anthology movie for theaters, and as a result, it was able to get into the submission list. So yeah, Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal should have been nominated instead. Still a great movie though, I recommend watching it with friends.
I guess love really makes a guy come out of his shell.
Behold, the only animated movie based on a pre-existing series to ever be nominated for this category. And the only other mockumentary on this list. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On is cute. I felt for Marcel's plight. I like the little world they build around him being this tiny little shell, and I like the growing friendship between him and his interviewer, and his relationship with his grandma is just so wholesome. Aside from that, it wasn't a movie I really got into. I enjoyed myself watching it, but in all honesty, I feel like the movie could have been shortened in some areas. Compared to a later film on this list, Surf's Up, another mockumentary, does not feel like it drags out because the story it tells warrants a longer runtime. We're exploring this island, we're building up to this tournament, we have subplots, friendships, and mentorships that need to be established. In Marcel, we're just in one house, following 3 characters with one consistent storyline. The quality of Surf's Up would have been compromised had it been shortened, while Marcel, on the other hand, would have benefited from a shorter runtime. Maybe an hour and 10 minutes instead? As well, I don't know if you have noticed, but this is the only live-action animation hybrid to be nominated. And I genuinely do not know how it was nominated when other animation hybrids were disqualified for not meeting the 75% animated qualification. While Marcel, a movie with objectively no animation outside of the shells, got nominated instead. I don't know, that's just weird. I like this movie, but between its overly long runtime for what it is, and it really not being an animated movie in this lineup of Best Animated Movie nominees, this really is the true black sheep of this category, and it really doesn't feel like it belongs here for that reason. I like the movie, I think you'll like it too, I just think something that feels like an animated movie deserved the nomination more. For now, I'll just say Jose, the Tiger, and the Fish should have been nominated instead. We don't get enough anime nominated in this category anyway.
We're going back in time.
Over and over again.
By now, you might have noticed a pattern. A lot of my picks for alternate choices in this category are all anime. That's not entirely a coincidence either, because the only anime movies that would ever be nominated are from Studio Ghibli. And while I do love Ghibli's output from the films I have seen, it does come off as the Academy just having a Ghibli bias. One which prevents other films from that medium from having the chance to shine. That was until Mirai broke this trend. And unfortunately, I did not think it was as good as Studio Ghibli, obviously. Mainly because the film is quite repetitive. The kid throws a tantrum, time travel shenanigans ensue, the kid is happy again with a better understanding of things, rinse and repeat. Is it bad? No, these parts can be fun and have some great visuals, and I really like the bit with the train from hell and the literal family tree. But at the same time, at points it felt like I was watching episodes from a mini-series stitched together. I'm not against repetitive storytelling. I mean, God of War Ragnarok Valhalla is probably one of the best epilogues I have ever seen. I won't compare the two for obvious reasons, but for what it is, Mirai is a cute fantasy movie that just repeats itself a little too much. There were probably better movies to pick from, but it's nice to see another studio from Japan get recognition, and just for that, I will say its nomination is earned. Frankenweenie feels less like a parody, like one would imagine the title promises, and more like a true love letter to the dark and macabre monster movies of old. It has the same Tim Burton charm one would expect, and I love how much detail is put into every character, background or main, each having their own unique designs that tells you exactly what kind of person they are, even homaging characters from other horror movies. And now that I've lost the pet that was near and dear to me, I relate to Victor and appreciate this movie's message about grief, loss, and enduring love on a more personal level now. But let's not kid ourselves, the final act where the kids start creating their own monsters, which also homage classic creature features like Gremlins and Gamera, is the highlight of the entire film. It's definitely not the best Tim Burton movie, and I feel like this movie's message would have hit harder had it ended with Victor accepting Sparky's passing but holding on to the love he had for him instead of a fake-out death. But that's just cynical adult me speaking. It's a perfectly fine film. If I had to choose a different movie to nominate, Rise of the Guardians would have been my pick, but Frankenweenie is a good movie. And hey, for a 6 out of 10, it ranks pretty high.
When I grow up, I want to go to the moon!
Why wait?
Well, there have been attempts by various companies to emulate the style of the Renaissance Disney movies. Over the Moon, in my opinion, is one of the more sincere attempts. And this thought, overall, is what I kept thinking throughout the entire movie. It really does come off as someone's loving homage to it. Was it successful at emulating the Disney Renaissance? Let's talk about the good stuff first. Visually, this movie is great. For the most part, it looks like your standard Western animated film, but once you get to the moon and the supernatural elements take place, this movie becomes gorgeous. The bright colors, the designs, the creatures, the musical numbers, it's all great, and its core theme and the overall heart of the film. Learning to accept change and embrace the family you still have is really palpable here. Like that one moment where the goddess criticizes Fei-Fei's hairstyle, but then we see why she cut it that way? The tragedy in that moment is actually really quite palpable. These aspects feel lifted straight from the Disney Renaissance in the best possible way. However, while the emotional beats definitely hit, I will not deny it would have hit harder had we spent more time with the family. Because as soon as we get to the moon, with the exception of the stepbrother, they are all pretty much forgotten. The stepmom, the father, all of it is completely forgotten. And in their place, we've got a platter of comic relief characters. From the stepbrother who is just there, to the pangolin dog thing that's also just kind of there. And we've also got these chickens. Look, these things don't ruin the movie, but it definitely weakens it. And while the songs are not bad, the Goddess's song in particular is probably the best in the entire movie, but most of them are not particularly memorable, and they just kinda come off as, well, knockoff Disney. And I'll be honest, I feel like a lot of this conflict could have been avoided had the dad kept Fei-Fei in the loop about his remarriage before the celebration of them being engaged. That's not a healthy way of getting a child to adjust to change. Besides that, Over the Moon is a nice love letter to the Disney Renaissance style of animated movies, and definitely aimed for great heights. But ultimately sputtered out halfway towards its goal, and yeah, it just came a little too short of the finish line. 2020 really didn't have many good picks, but if I had to really choose a replacement, I've heard a lot of good things about Lupin III the First. I haven't seen the movie myself, but since The Willoughbys is not best animated feature material, for now, this is what I'll say should have taken its place.
Get your fucking dog, bitch! It don't bite. Yes, it do!
Well, Isle of Dogs is certainly a movie. I've only seen 4 of Wes Anderson's films, 2 of them of which are on this list. And I have heard people say his later movies are very much style over substance. I will disagree with that notion, at least for the films I have seen, all except for Isle of Dogs, which does very much feel like that. This movie is definitely one of the more divisive entries on this list. Some people love it, some people don't. I just think it's good in a 6 out of 10 way. In terms of animation, it's a step up from Fantastic Mr. Fox. The character movement is better, the cinematography is better, you get the point. I like its creativity and its dry sense of humor, and even the unlikely bond Chief and Atari end up forming is all good. Speaking of Chief, he is an interesting character. He is a stray that tried to live life as a pet, but his wild nature prevented him from being one. So he both gave up on being a pet, but not entirely to some extent. and its core theme about government corruption and propaganda is, while not the best implemented on the list, does give the film enough of a bite, pun not intended, to make it stand out from the rest of the list. Unfortunately, much like Monster House, its premise is what really carries the film. The side characters weren't as fleshed out as they could be, and I feel like some of them could have A, been condensed into a single character for a much smaller but more tightly written cast, or B, written out entirely. The latter can range from two types of characters. The first half is Chief's love interest, who adds nothing to the film, and the second half is Tracy. Though not a terrible character, she doesn't really have anything to her character aside from being the foreign exchange student trying to take down the corrupt Japanese government. To be fair, Tracy is not a pointless character. She actually does have a role in the movie that's quite important, but after hearing what other people have to say, I have to admit I agree with them. It's kind of weird having the one character protesting the government corruption of Japan being someone who is not from Japan. Also, at the end, Tracy, a 17-year-old high schooler, literally hooks up with Atari, a 12-year-old.
What the f***?
And this ain't like Happy Sugar Life where you're supposed to find this uncomfortable. This is supposed to be a happy couple. But even when we disregard that uncomfortable implication, the worst part about Tracy is that I feel like her presence takes away screen time that could have been used to develop the other characters. Still, Isle of Dogs was a good movie. Not one of the greatest, but a good movie. From what I hear, people say Liz and the Bluebird deserved the nomination more, and while I haven't seen that film, I'll just go with the flow and say,
I agree.
Is that the frickin' horse from Horsing Around?
Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron is a good movie. What's that? I'm supposed to say Cimarron wrong? For the lulz? Well, okay, if you say so. Spirit, Stallion of the Simians is a good movie. That's all I have to really say. For how much people praise this film, I kind of find myself thinking it's just an okay kind of good. The CGI they blend in with the 2D animation has not aged well at parts. I do not care for the romance with Rain, nor do I think Spirit himself is a compelling protagonist. But the movie's strength lies within everything else. The animation, the art direction, the adventure, the action set pieces, how it conveys the story without the horses talking at all, minus the occasional bit of narration. All of this is really good stuff. I'm not saying the movie is bad or even disappointing, just not the most compelling film in this marathon. Even though parts of me want to say there were potentially better options that year, Mutant Aliens in particular looks visually more interesting if I have to be honest, I am nonetheless glad Spirit was nominated. It definitely earned it.
Alright, Jimbo, I think it's time to tell you about the time that you were conceived.
Well, would you look at that? Even back at its very beginnings, it still made some questionable nominations. I'll keep this brief as I've talked about Jimmy Neutron before, so let's get through this. I like the message it has about having smarts is not the same as having life experience. I can still see why Hugh is a meme machine. I like the characters, and the whole movie has a really fun and creative tone that brings back a childlike sense of wonder and fun. This time around, however, I found that childish sense of humor to be kind of tiring. While it's definitely on the lower end of the list due to far better candidates, and I personally am glad Shrek won the award over this, as one of the first nominees, I think its place was unearned. Waking Life should have been nominated instead, there's no questioning that. As is, it's not a masterpiece, but if you have kids and want to spend an afternoon with them, then this is a pretty decent choice.
You are dead! Not a big surprise!
If I had a nickel for every time the Oscars nominated an animated film about some guy being sent to the underworld and interacting with dead people, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's a welcome surprise. With that said, Tim Burton's Corpse Bride is a pretty mixed bag, but I like the movie overall. I like the world of the dead with how creative its denizens are, and that skeleton song is just a real bop to listen to. And just its overall lampooning of arranged marriage and how absurd it is just great. If Happy Sugar Life taught me anything, that sucks. But truth be told, I think the best part of this movie is Emily. She easily has one of the best character arcs in this ranking. Wanting to be with Victor, regardless of it being a misunderstanding, because she believes he'll finally give her the happiness she could never have in life, but instead chooses to move on from her past and finds peace in knowing the one she loves is with the one he is meant to be with. That's so wholesome. But on the flip side, there are just as many flaws holding it back. None of the side characters were particularly memorable. The twist villain was obvious from a mile away, the misunderstanding didn't really add anything, the pacing, particularly in the middle, is quite off, and even though I think the love triangle is handled a lot better than most other films that do this, at least that I've seen, it still does come off as thin and emotionally distant. Honestly, when it comes to these parts, all I could do was think, I could be watching The Nightmare Before Christmas right now. Because not only is it visually more impressive, it is a lot more heartfelt, better paced, and overall more consistent in writing and quality. But what it does right, and it's just enough to allow it to stand above something like Jimmy Neutron, despite that film being far more consistent in quality. But Robots deserve the nomination, and you can't convince me otherwise.
Isn't there anything on that isn't about boxes?
The Box Trolls is kind of like the Wonder Park of this list, in the sense that it's basically every children's movie you've ever seen. But I will admit, it is definitely a better movie than Wonder Park by several miles. I had quite a bit of fun with this weird world they build up. The idea of a guy allergic to cheese wanting to join cheese-eating aristocrats is funny enough. But then you have a colorful cast of characters to add to that. I do not remember the names of these people, but I do remember them for their designs and personalities, like the leech guy. And while the Box Trolls themselves are just knockoff minions, I actually found them to be quite enjoyable. But its biggest point of contention would definitely be its main theme, propaganda and legacy. So basically, the main villain spreads rumors about the Box Trolls being man-eating monsters as a means to capture and execute them, using the main character's disappearance as proof. I don't think this is a bad idea for a story about misunderstood monsters, but between the storylines and the film's overall focus on comedy, makes it feel like it steals attention away from its own core theme. By comparison, The Sea Beast, a film much later on the list, has the exact same themes that this movie does, but its storylines nor its focus on adventure ever steal away from these themes. Instead, they feed in naturally to it, while those exact same themes feel more like a footnote here. Obviously, I think its nomination was unwarranted. If they needed to choose a cute, innocent kids film to be on this year's nomination list, minuscule Valley of the Lost Dance was a much better choice in my opinion. But for what it is, it's a good way to spend an afternoon with the little ones. Much like another movie on this list.
You seals have been an amazing audience. Now say, arf, arf, arf.
Song of the Sea is a movie a lot of people love, and even say it's one of the best films of the 2010s. I think it's an okay movie with some really strong elements. I really like how the kid goes from being a genuine asshole to his sister to legitimately caring about her. The animation, much like in their prior film to this, is still just as nice to look at, until it gets to any scene involving fantasy. When we get to those points, it blasts that movie out of the water. They're beautiful, wonderful, creative. What more could you want? And the music, especially the titular Song of the Sea, is really beautiful. And I like that it still embraces Irish folklore to tell its story. It gives it an identity all on its own, and I legitimately like how the Irish folklore trilogy overall takes place in different time periods, with this being the chronologically last one. It's like we're actually going through history as these mythical creatures adapt and adjust to the changing world, or changed world around them. And its story about grief and how to come to terms with it is pretty decent, minus the ending. I liked the ending when I first watched it, until I realized the mother coming back wasn't her spirit, like everyone else. It was her being revealed to, in fact, be alive. It doesn't ruin the movie, but this really does keep it from being any higher on the ranking. I know a part of the Selkie story and myth is tied to tragedy, but that part is not conveyed well in this film, and her reasoning to leave is vague at best. So for all we know, this could have been a case of the mother going to get milk and ditching them. Not the intention, but that's how it comes off. Despite this being the weakest cartoon saloon movie on the list, and the Irish folklore trilogy as a whole, the fact it's still a good movie in spite of its glaring flaws really speaks to how strong its best qualities are.
My ass would have stayed in the primordial soup if I knew there was gonna be days like this.
I must be out of my mind because I actually enjoyed The Croods quite a bit. Yeah, it definitely was one of the weaker nominations in 2013, but you know what? Much like Jimmy Neutron, it was a fun movie. I love the prehistoric world it builds up and the adventure overall, and there's plenty of fun mischief and misadventures occurring throughout. And I actually got invested in the journey of these cave people learning to take risks and try new things. Of course, its humor does mainly revolve around your typical caveman affair, and its story is very much a if you've seen one, you've seen them all type of affair. And with it being aimed at very young kids, it can be quite childish at times. But to be fair, it is nowhere near as childish, nor bombards you as much with its humor as what Jimmy Neutron did. I've never seen A Letter to Momo, but it honestly sounds and looks better than The Croods, and probably should have been nominated instead. And if not that, Monsters University was right there. Come on.
I did get luck.
No, you fetched a dirty, stinky animal.
Man, I loved the original Shaun the Sheep series as a kid. I remember renting the DVDs at my local library non-stop and enjoying a good wholesome time with my favorite Barnyard gang. And yeah, Shaun the Sheep movie, could they seriously not put an A or a the in the title? Is basically a feature-length episode of the series. The character writing, the humor, the misadventures, the more down-to-earth yet absurd creativity, it's all perfectly intact. And I am so glad it chose to keep in line with the original series this is, let's be honest, based on, than do something like the Casa Grandes movie or the Recess movie, where they take a simple slice of life series and turns it into a save the world story. For Shaun the Sheep, I just need him and his barnyard friends bleeding about the big city looking for their master, not them trying to stop Thanos from snapping half the universe away. I'm getting off track, but maybe it follows the spirit a bit too closely, because the movie doesn't really do anything to justify a feature-length runtime in my opinion. I would have preferred it if the Peanuts movie got the nomination instead, but this movie brought a nostalgic feeling back to me that I haven't felt in a long time. And as soon as this movie was over, I went back to watch those older episodes. Seriously, go watch Shaun the Sheep. It's all on YouTube for free. Trust me, it's a certified banger. And you'll enjoy the movie just as much.
Hey, just wondering if you got your photos printed?
Logos minted?
What?
I don't have much to say about Farmageddon, as everything I said about the first film also applies to this one. But I think it's marginally a better movie for the fact it actually feels like a movie. Like, this feels genuinely cinematic, and the story it tells just as much. At least, far more than what the original movie offered. But I think what elevated it was Lula. I love Lula. She's adorable, she's funny, and her plight to get home is the heart of the movie. It's funny, it's got fun action, it's got fun set pieces, it's basically Aardman's E.T. And of course I think Moseley deserved the nomination more. Come on, it's a passion project that, while not as funny, tells a much stronger story. but that's just my personal preference. Farmageddon is still another Aardman gem.
Do what you want, 'cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate.
The Pirates in an Adventure with Scientists. Or Band of Misfits, if you're a filthy, filthy American like yours truly. Even by Aardman standards, The Pirates is without a doubt their most unhinged movie to date, and I love it for that. From how all the pirates don't have names, just Pirate Captain or Second Pirate or Albino Pirate, to how there is a pirate who is clearly just a girl with a fake beard but nobody acknowledges this in any way. Mr. Bobo and his shtick with the word cards without a doubt created some of the best comedy in this whole ranking. They turn Charles Darwin from a brilliant mind into an incel who simps for Queen Elizabeth, who in this movie is not a kind ruler, but a maniac who wants to kill this dodo bird. The whole movie is just a comical farce and I love it. And it's very clear the people making this had a lot of fun. The characters don't really develop that much, and a lot of your typical family film cliches can be found here, but Aardman was clearly not aiming to make the next Lion King with this. They just wanted a funny seafaring adventure, and you know what? They did a great job. It's honestly a shame they never did anything else with the Pirates after this, and that its planned sequel was shelved. But from what we've got, this was a funny movie.
Problem is, I lost my balls. They're stuck all over the place.
I know, right? I'm genuinely surprised Genndy Tartakovsky's Fixed actually ranks this high, especially since the promotional material made it out to be something far less than. But considering this is his first time making a raunchy comedy, it actually turned out a lot better than one would expect. No, really, it did. The best way I can describe Fixed is that it's basically Sausage Party, except it has actual substance to it. Essentially, this is a story about how who you are is not connected to any kind of physical memento. In this case, a dog who learns he is about to be neutered, and having to come to terms with the fact that even without them, he will not be any less of who he is. Weird, but oddly, it kind of works. Taking this overconfident dog and forcing him into an existential crisis to make him become a better person. And yeah, I surprisingly liked Bull. He has an ego, but he will stand up for his friends. He will sacrifice a lot for the people he loves. And when he does something that's truly bad, it's something born both of misunderstanding and basically feeling like he has no other choice. And I actually do like the romance he has with the show dog. They're both loyal, their love for each other is genuine, and when he leaves her for another dog, it's as I said, it's under the impression she is with someone else. And even then, it's with great reluctance. And when he realizes he messed up, he makes it up for her by quite literally sacrificing whatever dignity he had left just to save her own. And the reconciliation is a genuinely sweet moment. For as sweet as the scene following it can be. This is my long way of saying Bull is actually a very likable main character with a really good story arc. He is just someone whose pride needs to be brought down a few pegs and learn not to tie his identity to anything physical about him. And that the core romance he has is actually a well-written, mature relationship. Yes, I will admit the raunchy humor is a lot, and is definitely the worst part of the movie, especially when we get to the Hump House section. That was just really unneeded. But to be fair, there was some actually funny jokes in here that didn't rely on that. Ultimately, I appreciate this movie more for what it avoided being and ended up becoming. With that said, I really don't think it deserved the nomination, and it's quite obvious that... Wait, I think I got something wrong. Fixed wasn't even nominated. But if it wasn't nominated, why is it in my notes? Oh, wait a minute. Here's an extra note I left for myself. First, to show people that the most controversial animated movie of 2025 is better than half of the films to ever be nominated for this award. And to also show people that the most controversial film of 2025 is somehow better than half of all the films ever nominated for this award. Well, there you have it. It's a better movie than half of the films on this list, as well as some of the actual winners. That's honestly kind of depressing.
Alright, you got my balls back!
The Nutters of the Eastern Forest proudly present Nuts!
With how much this franchise was milked, it's actually quite jarring coming back to this relatively grounded first movie. With that said, yeah, Ice Age 1 is still a good movie. Sure, it's derivative of other movies, but to make up for that, it has a lot of good comedy, it has a fun road trip element, and it has Scrat. What could you possibly want more? And to be fair, it has some strong elements going for it. That scene in the cave with Manny is still a real tearjerker even to this day, and to no one's surprise, Diego is easily hands down the best character, going through an arc where he comes to learn the difference between being part of a pack and a herd, and ultimately chooses his found family. All in all, it's a solid watch, but in regards to this list, it just has the misfortune of competing with some truly heavy hitters. I won't deny the Powerpuff Girls movie would have been a much better pick, but I also won't deny that there were other, more questionable contenders from that year as well. So maybe this was the best outcome.
Except he wasn't a sponge.
So?
So it didn't grow back!
I Lost My Body is probably one of the more interesting films on this ranking, and probably one of the more art-housey things to be nominated for this award. Before I start describing it, I probably should talk about the basic premise. Basically, a severed hand journeys across a city to find its original owner? I think that's what you'd call it. It sounds like a weird yet kind of interesting idea, but the antics of the hand weren't that enthralling nor entertaining, as it just comes off as a little adventure that's largely disconnected from the main story. Pun not intended. These segments of the movie are not bad, they just kind of remind me of any adventure involving a small thing running around the big world. Just instead of a cat, a toaster, or something similar, is a disembodied hand. And I do understand the metaphor, longing for a part of you that can never be regained, be it family, someone you liked, or in this case, the hand's body. But in comparison, the segments of the movie starring the hand's original owner, that's not a spoiler, it's obvious from the very beginning, is really interesting. This guy wants to find a happiness he lost back when his family died, and does whatever he can to try and find it, even if it means being a creep at points. What, with him following this girl and basically trying to get with her? But I can understand it because he thinks getting with this girl will make him happy. And to be fair, unlike Chico and Rita, the movie actually understands this romance is very questionable from the start, as I'll put it. And instead of passing it off as cute like the former did, they commit to this part and it ends up blowing up in his face, and rightfully so. But it's hard to hate him exactly because he had sort of good intentions, but is simply unable to realize how those intentions looked in action, which causes him to sink further into this depressed mind and ultimately causes him to lose something much, much more important. And yeah, this whole scene was just really good. The tensions, the anxiety, the setup, this is clearly what the movie was building up to. It's one of those movies you watch to get an experience that you could never find in a Hollywood film, and I respect it for that. But if I have to be honest, Morona's Fantastic Tale would have been a much stronger nomination.
You take me to him! Take me to the son of a bitch!
I was really hoping to really love Loving Vincent going into it, and I do really like it. But considering this is by far the most experimental movie on this list, I was hoping to be blown away by it a little bit more. Which, yeah, let's get the elephant out of the room. Purely from an animation standpoint, this movie is astonishing. Not because it replicates Vincent van Gogh's art style, but because of how they replicated it. Yeah, what you're seeing here isn't stylized 2D or CG animation. This is rotoscoping entirely made from individual paintings done exactly in Van Gogh's art style, and is the first movie to ever use painting as a means of animation. On that merit alone, just like Boy in the World or Surf's Up, Loving Vincent is one of the most unique movies I have ever seen purely from its presentation. And to be even more fair, the mystery over Van Gogh's death, which is still a mystery to this day, is what really captivated me the most, and it really does make you wonder what actually happened to the artist IRL. With that said, outside of Vincent, none of the characters were particularly interesting or fleshed out, in my opinion, and the main character very much felt like an audience stand-in. But I think the reason why I didn't see it as the audacious masterpiece others see it as is because this is the kind of movie you watch to have an experience, not to kill an afternoon. That's what I think anyway. And Loving Vincent, in spite of it relying more on presentation, definitely deserved the nomination for just how legitimately unique it was.
Reality is an illusion, the universe is a hologram, buy gold, buy!
The Illusionist is a strange film. I'm not saying it's bad. I like its story on how unforgiving the entertainment business is, and how those seen as less talented are pushed to the wayside, and how while some people are able to adapt to difficult times, others are unable to. And this movie's ending really got to me. Bittersweet yet satisfying. But I think its main issue is that there is no dialogue, which is usually a point of praise, but it only ends up creating this sense of disconnect with the characters. Comparing it to a film later in the list, made by the same person, ironically enough, The Triplets of Belleville was much better at conveying the characters' struggles, motivations, and resolves in a way that is easy to comprehend just by looking at them. Here, unless you read the film's description, you wouldn't really know what and why these characters do what they do. All in all, a good movie with big issues holding it back. But I'm sorry, you can't convince me that there weren't better nominations that year. Megamind was sitting right there. But then again, it could have been worse. They could have given the nomination to Alpha and Omega instead. I think we're living in the good timeline, if I'm being honest. Zootopia 2 is definitely a better movie than the original. Not by a large margin, mind you, but still a better movie. Unlike another sequel on this list, all the great stuff about the original film remains intact here. The creative world building, how this mixed species society accommodates all animal types, even down to how each of the civilians behave dependent on their species. My favorite detail being that they paid enough attention to make the hippos actually run underwater, just like in real life. All that great stuff that made people fall in love with the first film's premise is still here. And, unlike the other sequel, which we will not mention, this sequel actually expands the world building in truly, honestly interesting ways. Primarily, how each of the city's biomes work and maintains them. The early days of Zootopia and the dissolution of entire districts. We also get to see more districts in this city. Taigas, marshlands, this underground society of reptiles. Speaking of which, would you look at that? New animals that weren't mentioned or featured in the first movie. They even answer some questions from the first film, like, what do the predators eat if they don't eat other animals? Where do marine animals live and how do they function? Where are the reptiles? Etc. And honestly, the racial allegory is a lot stronger here than the first movie. Mainly because I feel the prejudice mammals have against reptiles is a much stronger metaphor than the original movie's predator and prey dynamic. Mainly because it's now something truly superficial. But also for the simple fact that, unlike the first movie, it doesn't beat you over the head with it every 5 seconds. It's able to talk about things like cultural theft, the marginalization of minority groups, and the monopolization of knowledge by powerful elites, without having to constantly bring attention to it. And I honestly love this more than having keys jingled in my face at all times. And yeah, the stakes in the final act here are genuinely much higher than they were in the first film, mainly because it is less end of the world, end of our society, and much more personal and even somewhat realistic. And yeah, the action set pieces are a lot more fun here than they are in the original, and I'll even be more fair to it. The twist villain is a substantial improvement over Bellwether in every way. Even though he too was also an obvious twist villain, I think he works better than the Lamb Chop because 1, he is already sort of set up and his motivations line up. And 2, we already have a villain that we're already rooting against. A villain group, to be precise. And they are genuinely good villains at that. So it's kind of like an extra surprise on top of an already good sundae. With that said, I think having the plot revolving around Judy and Nick at odds just 1 week. 1 week after becoming partners is kind of contrived. Just have it take place a year after. As well, I don't think their dynamic is nearly as well written as it was in the first movie. Though I will admit their conflicting ideologies is also a lot more interesting than the first film. Also, I thought some of the callbacks to the prior film was cute, but the references to other movies took me out of the film a bit. Regardless, this was a good movie. Scarlet was most certainly a better pick, but this is Disney, and even in their current recession era, what are we going to do about it?
Oh, grow up! Just grow up!
I heard a lot of good things about Persepolis prior to actually watching it. All I knew is that it was loosely based on real events and the life of the author, and that it takes place during the Iranian Revolution, which saw the downfall of the old regime and the establishment of its current Islamic one. And you can guess the plot from here. We follow the main character as they grow up during this time, and how the turmoil caused by these events affects both her and her family throughout their lives. My thoughts on it? I think the second and third acts are some of the best parts of the movie. Seeing Margie go through life trying to find some sort of freedom but unable to in either another country or her own, falling deeper and deeper into a depression before finding a reason to climb back out. Everything in this section of the film made me really get into it and made me want to see how she'd get out of this rut. But at the same time, we've also got the comedy. It isn't bad, and I know people like its humor, but for me, it kinda took me out of the film. It doesn't take away from the tone overall, and it did provide some needed levity. But I don't know, it just wasn't my thing. And after hearing what others had to say, I have to agree that the movie is honestly too short for how much stuff they cram into it. And as a result, I couldn't really get emotionally attached to the characters or the conflict as much as I would have liked. Now, if I had to be cynical and compare this movie to another, Flee would be a perfect choice. Whereas Flee is about the turmoil one goes through during this kind of event and the horrific scale that this time period inflicted on people, Persepolis is about the long-term ramifications that someone would have to suffer with going through an event like this, and how it still haunts them in different ways years after. This is my way of saying, before actually talking about Flee, Flee is a great movie with a more consistent tone from beginning to end, which I prefer more. While I found the beginning of Persepolis to be kind of its lighter moments to be kind of out of place, and everything after the first act is really good. Overall, it's a good movie, but I have a few issues with it that keeps me from calling it great. I think Meet the Robinsons was the more entertaining film overall, but I can see why this film was nominated. And I do have a soft spot for it in my own unique way. Maybe it'll get better for me on a second viewing. Who knows? But until then, let's just keep going forward.
It's just a string!
A secret string!
Kubo and the Two Strings is a film I've always liked, but could never enjoy as much as other people have. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun movie with fun characters and fun set pieces with fun action to boot. I mean, I did enjoy the beetle and the monkey, and there was plenty of gorgeous visuals throughout the movie. The villains were not terrifying like they were obviously meant to be, and yeah, that's just it. It's a movie I like, but there's not much to talk about. It's basically just a road trip movie with samurai, and what else do you need? I've never seen Your Name, mainly because Body Swap is one of my least favorite storylines, but just going off of what I've heard and seen about it, I think it deserved the nomination more than Kubo. But yeah, that's the only way I can describe it. It's good. It's fun. The end. Honestly, I forgot a lot of what happened in How to Train Your Dragon 2, so I'll listen to a recap real quick. Okay, I remember. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is still a good movie, but man, is there a lot holding it back. On one hand, it expands the world in the ways you'd want to see it expanded. It introduces new dragons, new themes about leadership and responsibility, new factions. It furthers our characters' journeys in a way that feels organic from the first. And on the other hand, I feel like had the movie swapped some scenes around, it would have improved the movie a lot. Surprisingly, I agree with a lot of what Shafrilla has said about it. Had the movie began with Valka being kidnapped, for example, that would have been more impactful when she reunites with Hiccup. I even agree with Dean Zero on this one. What if instead of it just being a random dragon attack, what if it was the dragon attack instigated by Drago himself that results in Valka being kidnapped? Speaking of which, I like Drago at first, with him being built up as this big, ominous threat, but once he starts screaming, I lose all sense of fear of him. It's ridiculous. He is ridiculous. And by the end of it, it really does feel like nothing happened. This really shouldn't be the case. Look, it's not a bad or disposable sequel in any way, and I will definitely go back and rewatch it a few times, but it's definitely the weakest film in this trilogy. And yet it's still a 7 out of 10, which is more of a testament to how good this trilogy really is.
Excuse me, do you know how to get to town?
Yeah, it's back the way you came.
If Treasure Planet was the nail in the coffin for 2D animation at Disney, then The Princess and the Frog was its swan song. I like this movie. Maybe not as much as other people, but I do like it. The best way I can describe it is that it's fun. I like the New Orleans setting they put this story in. It's very unique for a retelling of a classic fairy tale. Lewis is the best character. The Bayou Adventure is a fun little quest that kept me entertained. Lewis is the best character. It has plenty of good musical numbers, not a single bad track, especially Friends on the Other Side. Have I mentioned that Lewis is the best character yet? I mean, aside from Dr. Facilier. If King Candy was the last great Disney villain in a modern sense, then he's the last great Disney villain in a classic sense. He has a cool design, he is an active threat, he is a manipulative scuzzball. I like how his personality is basically a more casual version of Hades, and his death goes really hard. How many Disney villains can you say were literally dragged to hell? But at the same time, the most evil thing he does achieve in this movie is turn someone into a frog and step on a bug. He's still a threat and obviously had more sinister intentions, but add to that, how he comes off as more like Ursula but without that same gravitas. He comes just this short of being one of Disney's greatest villains. I also don't understand how Tiana turning into a frog added to her character arc. While I personally think it's the weakest nomination of the 2009 shortlist, and that Ponyo should have been nominated in its place, it is a very heartfelt callback to the Disney Renaissance. But it also doesn't reach those same highs of the Disney Renaissance that it clearly wants to.
But am I not turtly enough for the Turtle Club?
Behold, Studio Ghibli's first, and so far to my knowledge, only co-production. The Red Turtle is a simple but beautifully told story about man's complex relationship with nature, forgiveness, and the universal need for human connection. All told without dialogue and topped off with a simple animation style that leads to some gorgeous visuals when appropriate to the situation. It has strong elements to its story, no doubt, and even some real tear-jerking moments. That's all I have to say, because much like Shaun the Sheep, its simplicity is its greatest weakness. When ignoring the obvious, The Red Turtle is probably Ghibli's weakest film and definitely the weakest outing they have in this category. Not only do I personally think things in this movie has been done better in dialogueless films later on the list, but by the end, outside of a few sparse moments, nothing about The Red Turtle has really stuck with me. Even The Croods, an objectively weaker film, has stuck with me even months after watching it, while I am struggling to remember most of The Red Turtle just days after seeing it. I haven't seen Phantom Boy, but I also have a weird hunch it would have been a better nomination. Still a good movie and a good way to spend an afternoon, definitely not one of Ghibli's best outings.
We have such good luck in nature.
I haven't seen Brother Bear since I was in elementary school, and I've only ever heard all the criticisms about it. But if I'm being honest, a lot of those criticisms are honestly just bad faith. Yes, the beginning and ending are the strongest parts of the film, but the middle honestly isn't that bad. It's a lot more juvenile, yes, but it's nothing that you wouldn't see in something like the first Ice Age movie, which we will get to eventually. But let's be honest, the journey of Kenai learning to love others and atone for his mistakes while being hunted down by his own brother is the highlight of this movie and what really drives it. And while Coda did start off as annoying, he actually did grow on me as the film went by. The Phil Collins songs definitely do get worse as the film goes by, especially the sad song, but I wouldn't call any of them actually terrible. If anything, this is just a better version of Pocahontas in the best way possible. I will admit I haven't seen Millennium Actress, and I do acknowledge it probably deserved to be nominated more. I'm not too bummed out that this got it instead, because its strongest elements are what really makes this movie work. I will defend this notion until the day I die. Bite me.
I am an orphan child.
This is the sweetest movie with the darkest opening imaginable. Nothing else much to say about My Life as a Courgette, or My Life as a Zucchini if you're in the USA. It was a nice movie with a wholesome message about found family and that no matter how dark your life may be or how alone you feel, your family, regardless of blood relations or not, will keep you safe and love you unconditionally. And I really like how these kids are portrayed as kids. Even subtle details like the coping mechanisms they have make them feel all believable. And they have a good rapport with each other. That's really it. Its runtime was long enough to tell its story, its characters are all likable, I like its message, it's just a good movie. Nothing else to say, really. Even though I enjoyed Mune, Guardian of the Moon a little bit more, I am happy that this got the nomination.
This is the way of cheese, but el queso!
Honestly, how could this not be a good movie when it's not just Wallace and Gromit, but also a sequel to their most iconic special? It was great seeing Feathers McGraw again, and he is still just as intimidating as he was in his debut. The whole film has that same British charm and creativity that Wallace and Gromit is famous for. And of course, using Wallace and Gromit as a commentary on how prolific AI has become in our modern culture is just brilliant. And it's fun to see characters return or even cameo from prior Aardman projects. And while I don't like how this movie basically walks back Wallace's character arc from The Wrong Trousers, unlike The Incredibles 2, that's only a minor gripe here because the rest of the movie makes up for that. But I'm not going to beat around the bush. The Day the Earth Blew Up would have made a much better nomination. Not saying Vengeance Most Foul is a bad movie, but The Day the Earth Blew Up is not only a lot funnier than Vengeance Most Foul, but also surprisingly has a stronger emotional core. But come on, it's Wallace and Gromit. I already knew this was going to be a good movie going into it, and let's be honest, so did you.
The good news is we'll be landing immediately. The bad news is we're crash landing.
The Wind Rises is unique because it is one of the few biopics to ever be nominated in this category. In this case, it combines two autobiographies, one which is also where the name came from, and the other about the life and career of the man who would build the Mitsubishi line of warplanes. On paper, if acknowledging how fictionalized it is, this should make for a really compelling story, or at least keep things interesting. But maybe it's my lack of interest in planes or with how unflinchingly stoic our protagonist is, but the first half of the movie was pretty dull. But that second half of the film leapt up into the stratosphere with just how good it was. The romance the two characters have was really sweet, and the ending especially hit me and my friends really hard. I'm going to go as far to say that this is the only romance in a movie I've seen that did something no other romance ever has. It actually made me cry. I have a feeling this will get knocked down several pegs as I watch more movies for this marathon, but I am glad I watched this.
Time travel! I see this as an absolute win.
On the surface, Arco seems like a very simple, straightforward story. Boy disobeys parents and gets stuck in the past, where he meets a girl. They become friends, adventure ensues, people hunt them down. Simple, elegant, classic. But no, it's so much better than that. Once again, I am going to spoil parts of this movie, so skip if you want to go into this film blind. I really like the idea of Arco not traveling back to our modern day, but instead a future version of our modern day that is the past to him. That is already an original concept that I love, but it gets better. The future world they create are really fascinating and feel genuinely unique to this film. The future present being a world riddled with natural disasters, robots that perform specific tasks, the schools basically being VR simulators for full-on immersion. This is a combo meal of concepts that go hand in hand like burgers and fries. And the friendship Arco has with Iris is sweet. And I really like the three people looking for Arco is at first portrayed as the usual conspiracy theorist bad guys hunting them down. And that is how they are built up through the entire film. Only for it to be revealed that they actually just want to help him and want answers as to where he came from. That is a great subversion of my expectations. And as a whole, this movie is really fun. Miki is the second best robot in the ranking, only second to Robot. And while we don't see much of the future, it really feels like something that would come straight out of Studio Ghibli with how many elements of both fantasy and nature are woven into it. Speaking of, there are points in this movie that looks so good or is written so well that this is basically the closest you'll get to a Studio Ghibli movie not made by Ghibli. The genuinely beautiful animation, the wonder, the relaxed, low-key personality. It honestly felt like I was watching something made by Hayao Miyazaki. And I dare not spoil the twist at the end because it really hits that hard when you watch the film yourself. But just know, it justifies why Arco suffers no consequences from breaking his parents' rules. I won't say it's the most original, but it's probably the second sweetest movie on the list by far.
Well, it's a big wide world and it's waiting for me and you.
Boy in the World is without a doubt one of the most unique movies in this entire ranking. Heck, one of the most unique movies I've ever seen purely by its visuals. I mean, just look at this movie's art style. It's very apparent there is no other film in this ranking that even comes close to how unique it is. Which makes sense because it's meant to represent how a kid sees the world. Bright, simple, and genuinely mesmerizing. From the countryside, which looks like, well, a child drew it, to the city made out of paper cutouts, to the more asymmetrical designs of farms and factories. Just from a purely visual standpoint, even in the slowest parts, I was captivated by what creative art designs they'd come up with next. That has never happened with me before in any other movie. It's all gorgeous in its own unique way, and a lot of clear passion was put into every frame. But it's not just the visuals that make it stand out. It's also the storytelling the visuals complement. The story it tells is a kid gradually losing his childhood innocence as unchecked capitalism and government corruption destroys the world around him. Hence why we go from simple, colorful artwork to more complicated, grayer imagery as the world becomes ever increasingly more distant. And the twist at the end, though it probably doesn't make much sense when you think about it, actually caught me off guard and I dare not spoil it. Boy in the World was a truly unique film, and I think it deserved its nomination purely based on that.
I'm the king of the castle, and you're a dirty rat!
I am proud to say I'm about to get 2 nickels from this list, because it has 2 Studio Ghibli movies about war. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, isn't it? Howl's Moving Castle is kind of a weird movie for me. In regards to the stuff I like, it definitely outnumbers the bad. I love this movie's portrayal on aging being a positive thing, not a negative, as well as its themes of compassion, personal loyalty, and the devastation of war. But it's not all heavy thematics. All the characters are fun in their own unique ways. Sophie adapting to her new situation but finding freedom in her new age. The kid pupil, the dog, the witch and the scarecrow. Calcifer the fire demon is especially fun. They're all fun. All except Howl, who, despite being in the dang title, is the least interesting part of Howl's Moving Castle. I mean, I get what they're going for. They wanted him to be this tortured character who is slowly losing his humanity and ends up pushing away and lashing out at others because of it. But if I could make a comparison, the Beast from Beauty and the Beast feels exactly like what Ghibli was trying to make Howl be like. But whereas the Beast felt like a consistent character at all times, Howl, on the other hand, comes off as him and his entire personality flipping on a dime. But don't you worry, because another part of that title makes up for it. The sheer creativity of the castle itself and the magic used in the movie is distinctly Studio Ghibli in the best way possible. Honestly, these movies really make me want to do a Ghibli ranking. But that would mean having to watch Earwig and the Witch. I am not ready to endure that kind of next level bad. Besides, I've got more important stuff to rank. In any case, Howl's Moving Castle definitely deserved its nomination.
Well, where are they?
And in the hole.
Coraline is honestly the perfect horror film for kids, with parents who don't want them watching straight up horror, and would definitely influence Laika's output going forward. I just wish the story was just as impressive. If you've ever seen a movie about a kid with distant parents, then you've already seen half of Coraline. But what really carries this movie is 2 factors. The first being the stop motion animation. Not only does it play to that uncanny valley feel really well when it needs to, it's also just a very whimsical film in the Tim Burton sense with its visuals, presentation, and designs. And the second is the other mother. She is definitely one of the most terrifying villains I've seen in a family film and has officially become one of my new top 10 villains, period. Heck, if I'm being honest, everything supernatural in Coraline is what easily carries this film. And you know what? I can forgive its shortcomings for that. I honestly would like to talk more about this movie at some point, but let's save that for later. Mary and Max probably deserved the nomination more, but I'm not complaining.
Norm, can you please come out?
I think I just did.
Nimona was a struggle for me. Not because I hated it, but because my mind was in a constant conflict. On one hand, I love the art style. It's beautiful, expressive, and energetic. And that goes for the overall personality this film has, which it just oozes at every seam. And the message about how media propaganda, prejudice, and how the government will always deflect blame at the expense of the common man is what really carries this film. But on the other hand, I feel like I've seen this story plenty of times in other places, and in some cases, done better. I also feel like the connection between Nimona and Ballister felt more like a flatter version of the friendship Wreck-It Ralph had with Vanellope. And I'll be honest, for a good while, I was afraid Nimona herself would end up being as annoying as characters like Sisu or Zen. But I am happy to say she never got on my nerves, and I found her to be a fun character and a good foil for Ballister. And I guess I should mention it. It's a woke movie, but honestly, it handles its representation really well. It feels genuine and not artificial like other movies. I found the movie to be okay on my first viewing, but I can say this is indeed a good movie. It's just one I've come to respect more than anything.
Only now the words, "Here be dragons," had been replaced with the words, "Here were dragons."
While How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is definitely an improvement over the second film, it also has flaws that keep it from being the grandiose finale other people say it is. The pacing is a lot better, and the stakes are once again a lot more personal, with it once again bringing everything back to that friendship the main characters have, and how responsibilities in the world at large is forcing the two leaders to decide on if they should continue living together or separately, putting what they both learned over the course of these movies to the test. The stakes are high, the ending is satisfyingly bittersweet. The villain, while not the greatest in my opinion, is still a step up from Screaming Man. But, as I said, I also feel like there's a lot holding it back. The side characters are honestly at their worst here. They are not funny and no longer have any purpose to the story, and the twins especially are the ones who suffer the most, as they are not only the unfunniest of the bunch, but actively make situations worse. Regardless, it's a much better finale that ties up its loose ends far better than the actual winner did. I have yet to watch Away, but I have a feeling it would have been a better nomination. But in the end, I'm happy to know that this franchise has stuck with so many people to the point it was able to be nominated not once, not twice, but thrice.
Attention everyone! Run for your lives! Robots have taken over the world! Our world!
The Mitchells vs. the Machines. Coming right off the coattails of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, this movie dares to ask the question, what if National Lampoon's Vacation took place during the events of Terminator 3? Obviously, this is a great premise and it has a lot of fun with it. The animation is so stylized and full of personality, from the bigger bombastic set pieces to the little details, and it just has fun with the idea of a rogue AI. The Furbies who worship the Dark Lord is honestly the best part of this entire movie, and the idea of the villain being a disgruntled Alexa is just funny. As well as everything to do with the robots are hilarious. Especially the two glitchy ones who become part of this dysfunctional family. It's just a lot of fun. Except, I honestly hate the internet humor this movie has. It may not technically be as bad as the internet humor in Ralph Breaks the Internet, but it definitely made me cringe a lot more and took me out of the movie at parts. And let's be honest, the story is nothing new. It's basically just a goofy movie, just with more goofs in the family and killer iPhones. But let's be honest, the story is not its strength, but more so its action, art direction, and spectacle. This movie was great, and even though a part of me thinks Fortune Favors Lady Nikiko would have been the better pick from a storytelling point of view, but this was a fun ride regardless.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
Behold, the first R-rated film to be nominated for Best Animated Feature, Anomalisa. Of all the movies on this ranking, this is the one that made me the most uncomfortable, for both the wrong and right reasons. On one hand, the movie follows a man suffering from Fragoli delusion, trying to escape his miserable life, and I like how it portrays this by having literally everyone in his world look and sound just like him, and you really feel for the guy for how distant he is from others because of it, and just wants to have something new in his life and move on with it. And I must emphasize that it does an amazing job at putting you in his place and making you feel as confused and uncomfortable as he is with the world around him. Except for one, the titular anomaly in his mundane world, Lisa. And to see him finally find a break in his mundane life only for it to once again fall back to square one is heartbreaking. But on the other hand, there is a lot of sexual content in this movie that I feel is kind of unnecessary. That's an uncomfortable thing I can live without, dog. And even though the animation looks good, the story this film tells doesn't convince me that it needs to be animated to tell its story. And while it does play around with the fact it's stop motion every once in a while, it could have been told just as well in live action. That's honestly really disappointing for me because you can't say that about every other film on this list. That includes The Boss Baby. And much like Chico and Rita, it's another story with a romance I don't really buy. But I don't think it takes anything away because there is actual chemistry between the two of them. Though I personally think The Boy and the Beast should have been nominated instead, it's all in all a good movie and is a masterpiece in what it strives to accomplish. I just think there are better films on this list overall.
No more tabby paw pie for me before bedtime.
Saying Lilo and Stitch is a great movie is like saying water is wet. Everything about it just came together to make one of Disney's most heartfelt and beloved films. From the struggles of the sisters, to Stitch finding his place in the world, to the unlikely friendship between two chaotic children, and the fun alien action. It all just blends together to make a truly oddball but adorable film about a found family and moving on. I personally think there are stronger movies made by Disney, and Lilo did get on my nerves at points, but that doesn't detract from a solid film. You've seen it, I've seen it, what more can I say? It's Lilo and Stitch. I don't think it stands up there as one of the company's all-time greats, but it's a certified modern classic. I hope it never gets remade.
Fox, incoming missiles, do a barrel roll.
Why? I can't barrel roll away from who I am.
Is it possible to really like a movie, but still feel it's a little overrated?
Did he just say, aye, he did?
I still really like Fantastic Mr. Fox regardless. I enjoy its dry humor. I think the set and character design is really good. But I think the best part of this movie is Mr. Fox himself. In many ways, he feels like a spiritual antithesis to Mr. Wolf, a former thief trying to go straight but is unable to resist his literal animal instinct, longing for the golden days of poultry theft. I personally think there are films entered into this category that tells a similar story to this but better. Heck, one of them outright won the award in that regard. But what props it up is the colorful cast of characters that embellish that Wes Anderson vibe. Even though I think it's held up a lot higher than what I think it personally deserves to be, this still deserved its nomination. Well done, Wes Anderson. Well done.
Run away and never return.
Just like how Boy and the World is the most unique movie on this ranking from a visual standpoint, Flea is unique in the fact that it's the only non-fictionalized biopic to ever be nominated. And because of that, the story this movie tells really does hit differently than every other film on this list. While it never gets gratuitous, it is very unapologetic on just how rough this family has it trying to escape their home country of Afghanistan. The fear of being drafted into war, the constant dread of having to hide from the corrupt figures that plague their newfound refuge, how they must rely on literal human traffickers to get them from one place to another, and the perils that abounds from that. And yet, in spite of all of that, they stick together through thick and thin, and the sacrifices they must make really does hit hard. All of this makes this one of the most compelling movies I've seen for this ranking thus far. Which brings us to the subplot of this movie, which adds a whole different kind of context and is actually quite important. Amin, the main character who this biopicture is based off of, is actually gay, but keeps it hidden because it isn't allowed in his culture and fears that, after all the hardship they've been through, he'll lose his family for this. And, after all they did, can you really blame him for thinking that? But the part where they reveal they always knew and don't care about that and are instead just happy he's with them, that was a really good moment and a good final note for the movie to end on. If they're all this good, more biopics should be nominated for this category, And since 2024's winner suggests less traditional films are going to be nominated, if not win, then I'm excited to see what film like this they'll nominate next.
Not a bear and not a yeti.
Of all the 2023 nominations, outside of the obvious, The Sea Beast was honestly the one film that felt like a fluke that year. Compared to movies with innovative animation, clear passion projects, and Pixar's Cringe Fest the movie, there was no way this generic-looking movie would be that good. It's that good. It has a lot of fun action, sure, but I think its strongest parts are 1. Its messages about propaganda and legacy, which it unflinchingly focuses on, and integrates into the story a lot better than the Box Trolls did. And 2, it's the characters. From the hunter who has to accept the war he fought was all built on lies, to the girl conflicted about her family legacy after learning the truth. But I think the best character is, without a doubt, Captain Crow. He could have been vilified so easily, just a one-note bad guy, but instead they make him a fully fleshed out person, one with his own turmoils and even his own little character arc. He's like John Silver if Jim never made him become a better person. And I love how the movie portrays the scale of these monsters, and how it will even just let certain scenes linger. You know what, as overused as this saying is, this genuinely feels like something Disney would make during their golden age, and easily stands up there with their Renaissance lineup. And while I do think Phil Tippett's Mad God deserved it more, I won't deny The Sea Beast definitely earned its nomination. Unlike another certain movie on this list. Good job, Netflix, you've re-earned my subscription. Note to self, get ready to make the Netflix animated movie ranking. I want an excuse to watch this again. Treasure Planet is so good. How come nobody ever told me? I do not consider it one of Disney's all-time greats, but this was a really strong movie. I liked the adventure in this sci-fi steampunk-esque world they build. I enjoyed most of the characters. And yeah, John Silver and Jim Hawkins have the best story arcs, by proxy of how much they are tied into each other. Both are people looking for something in life, but end up making the other a better person. Speaking of which, John Silver easily has one of the best redemption arcs in any movie I've personally seen, and has gone down as one of my all-time favorite villains. Yeah, the parts on the titular Treasure Planet were not as strong as the parts before, and yeah, I'll be honest, the robot was annoying as hell. And a few other flaws, like Doppler and Amelia's honestly forced romance, keep this film from being ranked any higher. But if I'm being truthful, if traditional animation had to die out at Disney, at least it went out with a certified bang.
I am a robot. Beep boop, son. Beep boop.
I watched Robot Dreams the same day as The Wind Rises, and this was also an emotional experience. Just imagine 5 centimeters per second, but with dogs, robots, and set in 1980s America. And you've sort of got Robot Dreams. Through this surprisingly simple story about 2 friends torn apart by circumstances out of their control, it's able to present a lot of great themes and ideas about grief, hope, and moving on. But outside of that, man, this movie is just so charming and enjoyable. And a part of that is that it's able to do this without any spoken dialogue. Spoilers for later, but while I do think The Triplets of Belleville is a better film objectively speaking, I think that film was just a tad too complicated and it was hard to follow the plot at points. This movie, while a lot more simple, is a lot easier to follow because of that simplicity. And that ending, it really is what shot this movie as high up on this list as it did, and it's honestly one of my favorite scenes in any movie, period. The whole movie is just creative, emotional, charming. Honestly, I don't want to give away too much, and it might be worth making a separate video on. Go watch Robot Dreams, you won't regret it. Very good, parents! From the people who brought you Skunk Fu comes the movie that single-handedly brought them into the fold of beloved studios. The Secret of Kells, and right off the bat, this is one of the most unique films I've seen. Its animation is stunning, creative, and distinct, and its art direction turns even simple scenes into stunning moments. And the film's vibe is just unlike any other. From its design to its music, the whole film really dives deep into its Celtic Irish roots. So much so, it really makes you feel like you're listening to an old Celtic folktale more than actually watching a movie. Unfortunately, the story itself is not as special. If anything, it's very basic. Now, it doesn't take away from the rest of the movie, as it does give us a chance to hang out with all the characters, who are all as enjoyable as they look, especially our main characters, who have the best dynamics with each other. With that said, I wish we did spend more time with Aisling in the forest, as a lot of the most interesting stuff in the film happens there. And I will also admit, some of the character designs are just weird, like this one guy who is just a geriatric Omi, and this guy who is...
Is that blackface, dude?
Regardless, this is a genuinely fun movie, and I feel like its nomination was well earned for just how different it was from every other animated movie that year.
Surf's up, dude!
Honestly, I keep forgetting just how good Surf's Up is. Its mockumentary style of storytelling and the lengths they went to make it feel like this, still, to this day, makes it one of the most unique films I've seen on this basis alone. But I like a lot of other things about it too. I like that Cody's underdog story isn't your usual one, where it's instead about him going into exile after his overconfidence humiliates him, and comes across another outcast and he learns and grows from there. Speaking of which, Big Z is honestly a really interesting character. A guy so good at what he did, he basically invented the sport, but goes into hiding once better, younger surfers come onto the scene. And the whole movie is just a lot of fun. From its surfing to its humor, it's amazing that it takes Sony well over 10 years to even make something as close to Surf's Up again. But that should tell you just how good this movie is. There is only one Surf's Up.
How can I be adopted when I'm a triplet?
They're all adopted.
The Triplets of Belleville, often regarded as one of the greatest animated movies ever made. And yeah, I'm a sucker for it as well. This is a very strange movie, from its art style to the expansive backgrounds, even to the way the story is told. But it adds up and makes a fleshed out story about a devoted grandma trying to save her grandchild from the mafia really work. And the whole story in that regard is just so heartfelt, and I like how even though the world treats the characters like dirt, they make the best of a terrible situation. And out of all the movies without dialogue on this list, this is so far the one that's told the best. And while the beginning honestly dragged a little too much for my liking and got uncomfortable at points, the second half makes up for it and is non-stop entertaining and funny. That moment with the car is going to stick with me for all the right reasons. It's honestly difficult to say whether or not Tokyo Godfathers deserved the nomination more, but frankly, that's like asking if you'd rather have birthday cake or pizza. Whichever one you choose, we all win either way.
Do a barrel roll, man!
You know, when you watch movies like The Breadwinner, it's kind of hard to believe that this is the same studio that also brought us Skunk Fu. With that said, The Breadwinner, Cartoon Saloon's first movie to not be based on Irish folklore, but instead the struggles that girls must face in Afghanistan. And this movie does not hold back any punches when it comes to showing just how bad they have it. And it is damn effective at getting that across. I bring this up because it genuinely makes the struggles our hero has to go through even more investing. Whenever Parvana has to disguise herself as a boy to support her family, I genuinely felt tense every time she stepped outside at home, knowing that if she is caught... But we also understand why they have to, because they literally have no choice, and she's not the only one. And even though it is a fictional story, the fact that this is what a lot of women there in real life have to do to survive adds a layer of context to this movie that similar stories like it doesn't have. And while there are exceptions to this rule, they're just unfortunately the hay in the needle stack that is the world our main character was unfortunately born into. Not only that, but Parvana using a story her father told her to come to terms with her brother's death over the course of the entire film is really creative. And all of this ties into its main message beautifully. No matter how hard, no matter how tough, someone, somewhere, will rise to the occasion to help someone in need. If I had any complaints about this movie, it's that the ending doesn't feel conclusionary. Like, I know the family will reunite and all, but it really doesn't come off like that to me. But like with Song of the Sea, it's a minor nitpick in a really strong film.
Oh, hell no, Kung Fu Panda. You shouldn't have done that.
Gee, who could have guessed Kung Fu Panda would be so high up? I'll keep it brief because what I can say about this movie has already been said by a lot of other people. The action is great, the message is one of DreamWorks' best, Poe's journey of self-acceptance is one of the most well-written arcs in the company's filmography, Tai Lung is an awesome villain. Yeah, that's all I really have to say, because there is nothing new to say. Go watch any essay or video talking about the Kung Fu Panda franchise, because there is no secret ingredient as to why this movie has become one of DreamWorks' most beloved.
I always thought I was a little bit unique.
We are unique! Exactly the same!
I'll be honest, despite how good Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is, the only reason it's ranking lower than what I imagine most people would place it is because I am not that big of a Spider-Man fan. I've always been more of a Hulk guy, and as such, this is actually the first Spider-Man movie I've ever watched. Yeah, I know, but since Into the Spider-Verse doesn't count for this list, I'm not obligated to watch it. Just yet. I imagine if I did like Spider-Man more, it probably would rank higher, but I really enjoyed myself regardless. Going into it, I was expecting amazing animation, but even after hearing how it blends multiple different styles together, it was way better and goes way harder than how people were describing it. This is one of the best looking animated movies I have ever seen, period. I love the references and uses of other versions of Spider-Man, and it hands down tells one of the best multiverse stories I've seen. Or at least a lot better than the MCU, that is. Why? Because it fits perfectly with the core idea of the movie. Who you are is up to you and no one else gets to decide that, even if it means defying apparent destiny. And it's not just its thematic core that adds to just how good the story is. Its emotional core adds to it as well, from Gwen and her dad to Miles' struggle with balancing his superhero life and his regular life. Put all three of these together and you get one of the best stories in this entire ranking. And I love other things about it too. From the hilarious absurdity of some random throwaway gag from the first movie becoming a major villain, to that same villain who starts off as a joke becoming a genuine threat. But even though this movie actually does provide a 3-act story and complete story arcs for all of its characters, this still feels more like a part 1, whose part 2 has been delayed years past its original release date. And I'm sorry, I know they wanted Spider-Woman to be this badass. Her being pregnant in the 3rd trimester nonetheless makes all of the action scenes she's a part of look ridiculous. I get stuff like this happened in the comics, but that doesn't mean it necessarily has to happen in the movies. Still a great movie, and I will definitely watch the other Spider-Verse movies when they come out.
Yo mom is so old. When I told her to act her age, she freaking died.
Despite this being the first time I've watched When Marnie Was There in a couple of years, I don't have too much to say that I haven't already. I like its atmosphere, its attention to detail, and Anna's story and the mystery of who Marnie really is are honestly the most engaging parts of the film. That's it. That's all I have to say. It's still a great movie, and it's basically a sample platter of all of Ghibli's best qualities as a studio.
There's a Bear on My Chair by Ross Collins.
I consider Ernest and Celestine to be the mirror antithesis to A Cat in Paris. While the latter relies very much on its art style and a sense of thrill to carry it, Ernest and Celestine is instead entirely reliant on its characters and their struggles, with how society doesn't accept them for who they are, and instead trying to force them into a certain role, ultimately becoming criminals when they refuse. And yeah, I am a sucker for this movie too. Like everyone else, I agree that it's charming, it's got a nice storybook aesthetic, it's got a good message, and its ending with both going on trial in the other's court is honestly one of the best climaxes in this ranking thus far. You know what? I just convinced myself into liking it even more. I guess that really is the magic of Ernest and Celestine. It's simple, it's laid back, it's charming. What more could you want from a movie like this?
You know what they say? A little childhood trauma builds character.
Man, oh man, am I so glad I watched Memoir of a Snail. I wasn't expecting this movie to be as moving or as good as I heard other people make it out to be, but they're right. They're absolutely right. Just listening to the life story of these unfortunate twins trying to deal with their unfair hand dealt to them in life just had me engrossed for the entire runtime, as they looked for simple joys in their rough lives. But when circumstances causes them to be separated and have to live with different families, only for their lives to somehow get even worse in vastly different ways, this story hit me really hard. The best way I can describe this movie in layman's terms is that the writer took a look at the found family trope and said, yeah, let's be more cynical with it. From its color theory to its designs to its handling of a lot of mature themes, you can tell it's the same guy who made Mary and Max, as both of these films share a lot of that same DNA, including how unafraid it is to show topics like hoarding, depression, manipulation, etc. Though, I will admit, while Grace is a great character and you want to see her succeed in life, my favorite character is not her or the brother, but Pinky. She is such a pure and honest soul in this dark and miserable world that even I couldn't help but smile whenever she was on screen, and she's a good representation on just how important a good influence, or heck, even role model, in your life can really help you in the worst of times. With that said, I don't think it's as good as Mary and Max, and that really boils down to the ending. I'll leave a timestamp to skip this moment in case you don't want to hear me spoil it, but I think the brother being revealed to still be alive, while a nice twist and makes what Grace goes through all worthwhile, was kind of an arse pull, and it would have fit the themes of love, loss, and moving on much better had he just straight up died in that corrupted version of a church. In my opinion, it prevented this movie from being a flawless masterpiece, and yet, it does not ruin the movie in any way. It's still a fantastic watch in spite of this. If someone thinks this should have won the award over Flow, I would totally understand it. But as you could have probably guessed, there is at least one other nominee from 2024 I think is better. And we'll be getting to that film fairly soon. But first,
Tom and Ed used to live in a house on a cliff till it sank to the bottom of the ocean.
Moana has no right being as good as it is. This really does feel like a movie lifted straight out of the Disney Renaissance and can easily stand up there amongst the best of them. I really like the world building and all the mythical and fantasy elements they put in it. It fills the world with so much life and makes it feel lived in. The ocean has so much personality to it. The music by Lin-Manuel Miranda is a banger. Maui is a fun character, and though his dynamic with Moana is basically the same as every duo Disney had in this era, they still play off each other really well. Speaking of, Moana is, so far from what I've seen, their best protagonist in years. Her drive, her determination, her perseverance, it's all inspiring. Moana is the best Disney princess and you cannot change my mind. But the question that remains is, do I like Tamatoa? Yes, he was great and I loved his entire scene. But if I really had to nitpick anything, Moana really doesn't have a character arc, or at least a character arc befitting of this narrative. She wants to sail, but is not allowed to. She saves the day by sailing. I get that she struggles to learn the literal ropes, but it would have been much better if Moana was thalassophobic like her father and had to conquer her fears while doing this. This doesn't make Moana any less of a compelling protagonist. She's still the best one that decade, and heck, she's probably one of the best protagonists Disney animation has ever had, period. But if they did do that, it would have made her story even stronger. Also, the chicken is not funny in any way. But like I said, those are minor nitpicks. This movie definitely deserved this nomination, and I can't wait to see how Disney screws this movie up. Thanks, Bob Iger.
I'm gonna wreck some!
Unlike its sequel, the first Wreck-It Ralph still stands as a modern masterpiece. Nothing about this film, despite being 13 years old as of this video, feels dated in any way. The story of a bad guy wanting to be respected for his job, making an unlikely friendship with an equally detested glitch is really heartwarming, and seeing him grow to love himself for who he is and finding peace knowing he saved someone else from a similar lonely life, it just hits me in the feels. I love this secret world they build up and the possibilities it opens. King Candy is honestly one of the best Disney villains and the last good one the company had before it went down the drain. It has good comedy, it has good conflict. Honestly, what else can I say? It's Wreck-It Ralph, easily the best Disney movie made in recent memory, and probably the last great film we'll get from them for a long, long time.
You're not Sylvia. You're one of the kung fu creatures on the rampage.
Once again, it's not a really hard decision. Kung Fu Panda 2, much like another sequel on this list, is a textbook example on how you do a sequel. It expands the world, puts Po on a new journey that further fleshes out his character. It introduces a villain that thematically ties into the conflict of our hero. And its message about found family and moving on from trauma is powerful. I can see there being a divide on which film should be considered better, with Kung Fu Panda 1 arguably having the better storytelling, while Kung Fu Panda 2 having the better drama, but I don't know. Kung Fu Panda 2 won out as the better movie for me for that reason alone. But much like the first, there really isn't anything new that I can add that hasn't been said already. It's just that good.
Blazing dragons, we will save our day.
In many ways, the How to Train Your Dragon film series is probably DreamWorks' magnum opus when it comes to franchises. And it's just amazing how well these films held a consistent quality from movie to movie. But, obviously, the first film is still the best film. Its story about the runty outcast forming a forbidden friendship with his sworn enemy and using that to overcome his hurdles, and the way it was written makes it the most personal film this company has made. It sparks the imagination and makes you want to see more of this world. From its creativity to its lore, and just the overall soul this film has really does lie within the struggles of this one Viking and his desperate wish to prove himself. It makes sense why this film took off as well as it did, makes sense why it was the first DreamWorks film to get the live-action treatment, and it makes sense why it was one of the many strong contenders in 2010. And it definitely earned its nomination. On paper, I should really not like Wolfwalkers, because a lot like Elio, it lifts a lot of key plot points from prior films Cartoon Saloon made, in this case, The Secret of Kells. I mean, it has everything. The wall, the forbidden forest, the overprotective dad, the oppressive group conquering Ireland for their own use, etc. Right down to the main character befriending a magical forest girl. Normally, I'd say copying stuff from previous work is kind of lame. But here is the key difference. Unlike Elio, Wolfwalkers actually improves on it. Like, insultingly so. Much like Kells, it focuses on character relations, in which the drama stems from there. To start, I really like the friendship between Robin and Mev. It's sweet, it's fun, it's heartbreaking, it's like the friendship from Kells, but somehow even better. Same goes for the father-daughter conflict in this movie. While the father is overbearing and definitely gets on your nerves, they actually show his softer paternal side and makes it clear he does what he does out of love for his child. And the conflict between him and Robin is so raw and visceral and investing that I think this is what honestly put it above How to Train Your Dragon for me. It knew what it wanted to achieve and it did it with soaring colors. And if I'm allowed to make another Disney comparison, it even has a similar plot to Turning Red, where the main character turns into a beast that is seen as problematic, but is instead able to allow her to be their true selves. And much like with everything else, it's done a lot better here because unlike the Red Panda, which in universe is seen as a negative thing that's caused only harm, the wolf in this movie is portrayed as a symbol of freedom, so her choosing to walk among them instead of being forced into scullery makes a lot more thematic and narrative sense. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the most iconic scene of the film, the running of the wolves, and it deserves all the praise it gets. The animation is the best it's ever been from the studio. The moments where their wolf sense activates is exceptionally stunning. And there's even some cool allegory going on here as well. This movie takes place during the Cromwellian conquest of Ireland, as well as Ireland's extirpation of the wolf. I can't really add much to this discussion as I am not Irish, but with this context, it actually makes the analogy between the common folk and wolf walkers actually one of the most original metaphors on this list. Both are subjugated by a more powerful force, but the difference is that the wolves can run freely. As of this moment, this is my favorite cartoon saloon movie, and it definitely deserved the nomination.
He sees when you are sleeping. It's a little creepy. He knows when you're awake. He's in your room.
Man, I forgot just how good Klaus is. Without a doubt, this has become a modern Christmas classic. But what would you expect from the people who brought you The Emperor's New Groove? The whole movie just makes you feel that warm, fuzzy Christmas spirit. It has an amazing sense of humor not too different from The Emperor's New Groove. And speaking of the latter, I think a good chunk of this movie works because of our Kuzco-esque protagonist. Seeing him go from this spoiled brat to someone who genuinely cares is really, really compelling. And the animation. Oh, the animation is gorgeous. I wish 2D animation could come back if it can look this good. Yes, the liar revealed plotline still sucks and is overly indulgent, but you know what? It's a blemish, a very small blemish at that, on an otherwise perfect film.
Find someone to take care of these ducks right now and get back to work or you're fired!
Just imagine this. It's 2024 and DreamWorks just released one of their most universally reviled products, one that effectively tarnished their reputation worse than anything else. So one would imagine it'd take a long time for them to release something that'd restore that good faith people had in... Oh, that was quick. Yeah, The Wild Robot is really good. The themes and the ideas presented through the lens of a programmed machine having to learn to survive in a hostile wilderness is a great framing device, and the beautiful paint-inspired art style of the animation, it definitely helps add to it. But what I really like about this film is the heart of the movie. The unlikely found family between this serving robot and this orphan goose. This is what makes the movie work. Honestly, everyone has said everything that can be said about this film, so I'll keep it simple. The Wild Robot is absolutely what a modern classic looks like, and while it stinks it lost the Best Animated Feature award, I'm glad it was Flow who won just for what it represented for animation as a whole. That, and I am happy that this got nominated and not Moana 2. So that's a win right there.
It's a monster! Kill it! Kill it!
I've talked about this movie already, so let's just make it quick. Mike and Sully have great chemistry. I love the world this takes place in. Its humor and villains are great. The friendship between Boo and Sully is sweet. I like its message. The door chase. Realistically, what else can I say that hasn't been said already? It's Monsters Incorporated. It's one of the first Best Animated Feature nominees for a reason.
I am under the water. Please help me.
I knew a lot of people said Little Amelie was a good movie, but I never expected it to shoot itself straight into my personal top 4. But let me tell you, this movie somehow manages to recapture not only that same childhood wonder we all used to have, but genuinely makes you feel like you've gone back to childhood itself. And the environments are just gorgeous to look at. From every little thing, be it the leaves, the fish, the people, even the weather, everything is just so lively, which is highlighted more when Amelie's imagination takes hold. It makes for some of the best shots in this entire ranking. And like any good movie, it juxtaposes our main character's childhood innocence with how the people around her are dealing with more complicated issues, such as loss or generational trauma. Most of this being represented through Nishio and Kashima-san. But this innocence is what ends up leading Nishio to overcome her burdens as their friendship grows more and more, and helps the latter move on from that. This is easily one of the most compelling and genuine friendships in this entire ranking. And I will be honest and say, the plot point involving Amelie having a literal god complex may put some people off. But at the same time, it leads to some funny moments, like when she tries white chocolate for the first time.
Chocolate! Chocolate! Chocolate!
But at the same time, it's also something she grows out of when she is able to find connections with people who understand her. And I like that. How even the most minor of characters all add something to this movie. Honestly, I can't do this movie justice just by talking about it. Please, go watch this film. You've already seen K-pop Demon Hunters 100 times by this point. Please.
I don't want to die. I don't want to die.
Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is an amazing movie with stunning animation that single-handedly helped instigate the current DreamWorks renaissance we're seeing. Puss has easily one of the best character arcs in the franchise. The side characters are all memorable and hilarious. And the villains, be it the Three Bears crime family, Jack Horner, or even Death himself, are some of the best in the entire Shrek franchise. What more can I say that I haven't already? Or others have?
Yikes! But you're even more handsome now!
Yep. It's that good. Shrek 2 is not just the epitome of what a good sequel looks like, but a good movie in general. It builds on the world the first movie set up in a truly organic way. The conflict Shrek has regarding who and what he is and being the Prince of Fiona's Kingdom is one of the most compelling stories I've seen in not just DreamWorks', but any animated studio's catalog. The jokes are all bangers, the new characters are all mainstay classics, and the climax, ooh, the climax. I've already sung its praises in my villain song list, so I could just go on about it. Unlike Shark Tale, this movie deserved its nomination. Honestly, considering the only film that you could argue deserved the nomination more was Ghost in the Shell 2, should tell you just how perfect this movie is. It's the highest peak of the Shrek franchise, and its legacy lives on to this day. It may not have won the Oscar, but it certainly won me over. But of course, there is still one other. I'm going to be honest. Even though I haven't seen this movie in almost 10 years, and there were 83 other movies competing for this coveted #1 spot, I always knew from the very moment I started this ranking, there was absolutely no question, no contest on what the #1 pick would be. I may love Shrek 2, and I can see anyone ranking any of my top 10 picks for the best animated feature nominee. Or heck, a good majority of any of these movies on this ranking. But in my humble opinion, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya feels like the most uncompromised story in the entire ranking, choosing to stick as close to the original Tale of the Bamboo Cutter as possible while telling this folktale in a new medium for people to experience. You know, without having to change it to an unrecognizable degree. Kaguya herself is one of the most compelling protagonists in any movie on this list. How she comes to Earth to live amongst the people and the beast, but slowly loses all that. How she tries to fight back and keep whatever freedom she has, only for that to make things worse for everyone, including herself. Or how when she finally realizes how much she loves her life, even though it can really suck, it is ripped away from her not once, but twice. But her story isn't just one tale, because it's tied to another that is as different as it is equally tragic. The tale of Kaguya's stripes is tied to the story of her father's selfishness. How his attempts to make his daughter happy ironically ends up stealing what happiness she had in the world. She loses all her friends. Societal expectations try to take away her freedoms. The customs she must adhere to basically seek to strip her of her humanity, and the status given to her makes her into an object to be won by the people instead of being seen as another person. It's only when it's far too late that he realizes his mistake, and both end up losing the one thing they truly cherished. Also, I like that one servant girl. She somehow became my favorite side character in this entire ranking for reasons I still don't know. Maybe it has something to do with that meme-worthy face of hers? Getting off track. It is as beautifully told as it is gut-wrenching, and the atmosphere and animation does wonders to set that tone. It feels like the original story itself is popping right off that page and can go from pretty simple to almost dreamlike. But that makes sense, because this movie's themes about freedom and responsibility, life and suffering, how both happiness and sadness are needed to live a fulfilling life, are brought to vivid life. All of this stuff comes together to tell a brutal story that is as full of magic as it is tragic, as happy as it is sad, as heartbreaking as it is heartwarming. It is, as the movie puts it, the world they live in, the world we live in, is an equal amount of joy and sorrow, and we all experience it in different shades. Kind of like this movie. I think this movie hits harder for me now because I finally got through a pretty rough, pretty stressful 2 years of my life, and I can now finally start enjoying what life offers again. I guess the movie was right about one thing in that regard, that no matter how gray the storm is, there will be something at the other end. Everything comes full circle eventually. It has some slight pacing issues, but it's not even a complaint. The story The Tale of the Princess Kaguya tells is the rawest on this list, and how it tells it is just as much. This list could be pretty painful to get through at times, but it was worth it knowing that truly uncut gems like this are hidden amongst them. The Tale of the Princess Kaguya is the best animated feature to ever be nominated, and I am so glad this movie won the award it so deserved.
Big Hero 6!
Well, I'm going! Yeah, I think that sums up the category perfectly. The mediocre film wins the prestigious award solely because nobody bothered watching the actual genuine masterpiece. Which is really sad because people are more inclined to watch the winner more than the losers. But that doesn't take away from the fact over 60% of the films on this list are legitimate bangers. I wanted to do this ranking for the sheer varieties of movies I'd watch in it, and even though it could be quite painful at times, it was worth it to find new gems I will be sharing with my friends for years to come. And even get the chance to rediscover some oldies but goodies among them. Now that I got this list done, I really should hunker down and get my Edda and Eddie Season 3 and post-Renaissance Disney rankings made, as well as a few other essays. And hey, since I got half of that next Disney list watched by doing this, that should be easy. Overall, I give this lineup an 8 out of 10. Thank you for joining me on this long endeavor, and hopefully, after this year, we'll have some more unconventional wins. I'm One Fish Mob, and I'll see you next time.